Chapter 26:13. Xie Tian used Dark Age's method to create a group of useful people. Now he just needed to wait for their cultivations to increase. Although there weren't many people, only 1,000 or so, if all of them could break through to the End Realm or even the Emperor Realm, they would be a force that couldn't be underestimated. This was the only help Dark Age gave Xie Tian, and also Xie Tian's confidence. He didn't plan on making a move for now. Xie Tian didn't even plan on leaving the valley. Knowing that Xiao Chen's group had returned to the boundless world, there was no need to think about it. The Sword Sect would definitely conduct a large-scale search to find the person who could compete with Xiao Chen for the title of World Master. It was a pity that this search would be very difficult for the Sword Sect and Xiao Chen because they didn't even have a target. Like this, it was hard to be nervous, but Xiao Chen would definitely do this. So, Xie Tian only needed to hide his whereabouts for a period of time and not let Xiao Chen find him. This was Xie Tian's plan. He would hide in the dark and wait for the right time to suddenly deal a fatal blow to Xiao Chen. Like this, Xie Tian's chances would be much higher. Just as Xie Tian thought, after returning to the Sword Sect, Xiao Chen didn't even have time to visit his parents and directly went to the Sword Sect's main hall. Although he had left for a long time, the Sword Sect was still thriving under the management of Tsang Xing, Zhou Song, Nangong Guan, and the others. Xiao Chen was very satisfied with this. However, now wasn't the time to be arrogant. Xiao Chen had been thinking about the Righteous Path Alliance and Dark Age. Since both sides had reached a compromise, it was very likely that Dark Age had already chosen someone to compete with him for the title of World Master. The most important thing now was to confirm this person's identity. Xiao Chen didn't know who Dark Age had chosen. Not to mention Xiao Chen, even the ancestors of the Righteous Path Alliance didn't know who Dark Age had chosen. As such, finding this person became the most crucial step at the moment. The most suspicious targets were naturally the former sect leaders of the Ling Tian sect. For example, Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, and the others. After all, these people were all Emperor Realm Masters and could be considered the strongest masters in the Sword Sect. If Dark Age had to choose one person, it would have to choose from them. After all, it was impossible for the Dark Age to randomly choose an ordinary person to compete with him for the position of World Lord. This was too childish. His suspicions were directly locked onto Dao Xiong and the others. However, he couldn't be sure now. He had to investigate before he could be sure. Therefore, sitting on the main seat, Xiao Chen looked at Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, Song Xing, and the others and said calmly, "Nothing special happened recently, right?" Hearing this, Song Xing and the others shook their heads, indicating that nothing special had happened. Seeing this, Xiao Chen was silent for a moment before he continued. Song Xing, send someone to secretly investigate Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, Dan Qinyang, Luo Xing, and the others. See if they have done anything strange recently, or if their cultivations have improved significantly. Xiao Chen thought about the origin world for a long time and didn't tell Song Xing and the others. It wasn't that Xiao Chen didn't trust them, but even he didn't know much about the origin world. It wouldn't be of much use to tell them. Now, Xiao Chen only told Junhua, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and Qin Shuru about the origin world. Everyone was confused. He didn't tell them about the origin world for the time being. When they heard that Xiao Chen wanted to investigate Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, and the others, and even Luo Xing, Song Xing and the others were confused, but they still nodded respectfully. Since Xiao Chen had spoken, he naturally had his reasons. Seeing everyone nod, Xiao Chen added worriedly, "Just investigate in secret. Don't let anyone know." This matter could only be done in secret. After all, if Dao Xiong and the others knew about it, they would overthink. Xiao Chen didn't want to jump to conclusions too early. He temporarily placed his suspicions on Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, and the others. After instructing them, Shao Chen asked Song Xing and the others to leave, leaving only Long Qing and Xianyuan Ling looking at the two of them. Shao Chen sighed helplessly. Big brother, second sister, who do you think the Dark Age will choose to compete for the position of World Master? Without a clear target, Shao Chen was really uncomfortable. Hearing this, Long Qing didn't answer. Instead, it was Xianyuan Ling who spoke in a deep voice after a moment of silence. There are many creatures in the great thousand world. It is indeed like looking for a needle in a haystack. However, just as you thought, third brother, even if the Dark Age wants to choose a person, they won't choose an ordinary person. So, third brother's idea should be correct. However, it's not entirely correct to focus on Dao Xiong and the others. Don't forget that there are many old monsters in the great thousand world who have hidden themselves. They might also be the targets of the Dark Age. In Shao Chen's opinion, even if the Dark Age wanted to choose a person to compete with him, they would definitely choose from many masters, and their cultivation would have to be at least at the Emperor realm. Therefore, the possibility of it being Dao Xiong and the others was very high. However, after being reminded by Xianyuan Ling, Shao Chen quickly came back to his senses. Yes, it was indeed too one-sided to focus on Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, and the others. After all, they weren't the only Emperor Realm Masters in the Great Thousand World. During the war between the good and evil paths, many old monsters who had hidden themselves had also appeared. Compared to Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, and the others, the cultivation of these old monsters wasn't weak at all, and the Dark Age was more likely to choose them. It could be said that he was enlightened by Xianyuan Ling's words. Shao Chen was silent for a long time, then looked at Xianyuan Ling and said, "Big brother, if you are in charge, can you find out the whereabouts of these people and secretly investigate? With the current strength of the Sword Sect, this naturally won't be a problem." Hearing this, Xianyuan Ling replied with a chuckle, very confident. "Good, then I'll have to trouble Big Brother with this matter. See if these people's cultivation suddenly improved a lot. If the Dark Age contacted them, they would definitely find a way to improve their cultivation. Otherwise, with just their Emperor Realm cultivation, they aren't qualified to compete with me," Shao Chen said. To determine whether these people were in contact with the Dark Age, Shao Chen's idea was to see their cultivation. After all, if the Dark Age really chose someone to compete with him for the position of World Master, they would definitely improve their cultivation. After all, it was indeed impossible for an Emperor Realm Master to compete with Shao Chen. So, as long as there was a substantial or strange increase in their cultivation, they could determine whether they were related to the Dark Age. Seeking collection, monthly votes, recommendation. End of this chapter. Chapter 26:14. Shao Chen's first target was the sovereigns of the Great Thousand World. After all, they were the ones who were most likely to threaten him. Shao Chen's first target was the sovereigns of the Great Thousand World. After all, they were the ones who were most likely to threaten him. Shao Chen handed the matter over to Xianyuan Ling to handle, but his attitude was still the same. Before there was any evidence, it was best to investigate in secret. There was no need to make a big fuss. Xianyuan Ling also supported this. "Third brother, don't worry. I will personally take care of this matter." Xianyuan Ling nodded to Shao Chen and replied seriously. Shao Chen was naturally at ease with Xianyuan Ling. After all, the two of them had a good relationship. After discussing the matter, Shao Chen first returned home to see Shao Qing and Bai Ruyue. After leaving the Great Thousand World for so many years, now that he had returned, he had to see his parents. However, Shao Chen did not stay for long. After chatting with the two elders for a while, Shao Chen directly left. The reason why he did not personally investigate Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, and the other sovereigns was that Shao Chen had more important things to do, and that was to see Tenzu. As Tenzu of the Great Thousand World, Shao Chen had something to discuss with him. Of course, he also had some questions to ask. Shao Chen was naturally no stranger to Tenzu's residence. After leaving the Sword Sect alone, Xiao Chun rushed all the way to the place where the Tian clan lived. Along the way, Xiao Chun did not encounter the slightest obstruction. Soon, he arrived in front of the wooden house where the Tian clan lived. When Xiao Chun appeared, the Tian clan also walked out of the house. When he saw Xiao Chun, Tenzu did not look too surprised. Instead, he smiled gently and said, "I already guessed that you would come. Yes, there are some things that I would like to ask you about." Hearing this, Xiao Chun nodded and replied. With Xiao Chun's current cultivation, he could already stand on equal footing with Tenzu. If the two of them fought, Tenzu would not even be a match for Xiao Chun. However, Tenzu had a special status, so Xiao Chun still treated him with respect. Tenzu smiled and gestured for Xiao Chun to take a seat. Then, he personally brewed tea and said, "How was it? Did the trip to the great world go smoothly?" "Not bad, I have finally successfully broken through to the ancestor stage," Xiao Chun replied with a smile. After speaking, Xiao Chun paused for a moment before asking in a probing manner. "Do you know the origin world?" Xiao Chun wasn't sure if Tenzu knew about the origin world or not. After all, Tenzu's identity was different. Perhaps he knew about the origin world in advance. Tenzu was slightly taken aback when he heard Xiao Chun's words. He looked at Xiao Chun in surprise and asked, "Where did you hear this from?" Tenzu's change made Xiao Chun certain that he obviously knew about the origin world. Xiao Chun did not conceal this and replied truthfully, "I heard it from Palace Master Lin Yun." No wonder. So it was Lin Yun who told Xiao Chun. This was not surprising. Tenzu's eyes flashed with surprise. He stopped what he was doing and took the initiative to speak before Xiao Chun could ask. "Actually, I know very little about the origin world. Perhaps it's because I'm Tenzu, so I know some secrets that others don't know." Tenzu slowly told Xiao Chun everything he knew about the origin world. Xiao Chun was a little disappointed after listening to the Sky Clan's description, because Tenzu's understanding of the origin world was even less than Lin Yun's. Tenzu had never been to the origin world. The only thing he knew about the origin world was that it was the birthplace of heaven and earth. Other than that, Tenzu knew nothing about the origin world and its situation. Tenzu was a little disappointed that he couldn't answer Xiao Chun's first question. However, there was nothing he could do. After all, if he didn't know, he didn't know. There was no point in asking further. It seemed that he could only rely on himself to truly understand the origin world. However, according to Lin Yun, he would have to wait until he became the world lord of the Great Thousand World if he wanted to truly understand the origin world. After all, based on the current situation, the primogenitors of the origin world definitely wouldn't take the initiative to contact Xiao Chun. They would only contact Xiao Chun after the dust had settled in the Great Thousand World. Since it was impossible to get an answer for the time being, Xiao Chun did not continue to dwell on it. Instead, he told the Sky Ancestor everything he knew about the origin world, including the alliance of the Orthodox sects, the Dark Age, and the current situation of the vast Thousand World. Tenzu was obviously shocked when he heard Xiao Chun's words. He sat there in a daze for a long time without saying a word. He didn't know about the primogenitors of the origin world, nor did he know that the current situation of the Great Thousand World was already like this. The battle between the alliance of righteous sects and the Dark Age made Xiao Chun face an unknown opponent. Both sides were competing for the position of World Lord. After remaining silent for a long time, Tenzu finally looked at Xiao Chun with a complicated expression and asked, "What do you want me to do?" Tenzu naturally didn't think that Xiao Chun was looking for someone to confide in since Xiao Chun had told him everything. There must be a purpose for Xiao Chun to say so much. Tenzu didn't beat around the bush and asked directly. Personally, Tenzu was definitely on Xiao Chun's side. In this regard, Xiao Chun also said bluntly, "Can I directly absorb the origin energy now?" This was the question Xiao Chun was most concerned about. After all, in order to become the World Lord, one had to obtain the recognition of the origin energy of the Great Thousand World. If Shao Chun could obtain the recognition and absorb the origin energy of the Great Thousand World in one fell swoop, he could directly become the World Lord of the Great Thousand World. At that time, no matter how strong the person the Dark Age found was, it would be useless because the origin energy would be absorbed by Shao Chun by then. The World Lord of the Great Thousand World would also be determined. Naturally, there would be no competition. Shao Chun wanted to use the simplest and most direct method to solve the problem. However, the heavenly ancestor shook his head helplessly when he heard Shao Chun's words. I can't do anything about this. I've said before that although I'm the Tenzu of the Great Thousand World, I'm not qualified to intervene in the matter of the origin energy. The origin energy is an extremely strange force. Although it doesn't have complete spiritual intelligence like me, it also has its own thoughts. No one can interfere with who it chooses and recognizes, including me. Therefore, Shao Chun, if you want to obtain the origin energy, you can only rely on yourself. If the origin energy doesn't recognize you, remember not to use force. Otherwise, even if you're an ancestor now, you definitely won't be able to withstand the violence of the origin energy. Again, no one could interfere in the matter of the origin energy. After hearing Tenzu's answer, although Shao Chun had expected such an outcome, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed after hearing the answer. Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote recommend it. End of this chapter. Chapter 26:15. Tenzu could not interfere with the matter of the origin source energy. Moreover, according to Tenzu, although he was Tenzu, he did not have the ability to interfere with the World Master. Now that the alliance of the righteous path in the origin world and the Dark Age had reached a compromise, the Sky Clan could not decide who the World Master of the Great Thousand World would be. In fact, even if the World Master was not Shao Chun, Tenzu could not do anything and could only choose to submit. Tenzu could only submit to whoever was the World Master. This was something that could not be changed. After chatting with Tenzu for a long time, Shao Chun said with a solemn expression, I want to go to the ancestral land again. Shao Chun took the initiative to mention that he wanted to go to the ancestral land again. Tenzu did not refuse and readily agreed. Tenzu naturally hoped that Shao Chun could become the World Master of the Great Thousand World. However, this was not something that Tenzu could decide. However, the Sky Clan was willing to provide some help to Shao Chun as long as it was within their power. As for whether Shao Chun could succeed in the end, it would depend on his own ability. After receiving the Sky Clan's agreement, the two of them left together and headed straight for the ancestral land. Shao Chun was naturally familiar with the ancestral land. After all, Shao Chun had been to the ancestral land before. However, Shao Chun and Tenzu's expressions sank when they arrived at the ancestral land again. This was because the ancestral land in front of them was shrouded in a layer of platinum light. After trying, Shao Chun realized that he could not enter the ancestral land at all. The last time he came, Shao Chun could enter the ancestral land without any obstruction. However, this time, he could not enter the ancestral land at all. Seeing this scene, Shao Chun frowned slightly, while the heavenly ancestor beside him said helplessly, This is probably what the power of the origin means. Before the true Lord of the world is determined, the power of the origin should not have any contact with the outside world. Originally, the origin source energy had already recognized Shao Chun. Otherwise, it would not have allowed Shao Chun to absorb that small ball of origin source energy. However, the origin source energy had sealed the ancestral land. The meaning behind this was obvious. There was indeed someone in the Great Thousand World who was qualified to compete with Shao Chun for the position of World Master. The origin source energy was waiting for the final result. Whoever won the competition would be recognized by the origin source energy and become the World Master of the Great Thousand World. Faced with such an outcome, Shao Chun was a little helpless. Shao Chun could not break through the power that sealed the ancestral land. Even though he was an ancestor, he could not break through this power at all. In this way, if Shao Chun wanted to become the world master of the Great Thousand World, there was only one way left, and that was to win the next competition. Only by defeating the competitor chosen by the Dark Age would Shao Chun be able to enter the ancestral land again and become the world master of the Great Thousand World. "Let's go," Shao Chun said to Tenzu after glancing helplessly in the direction of the ancestral land. Since he could not enter the ancestral land, there was no point in continuing to stay here. The most important thing now was to find the competitor chosen by the Dark Age as soon as possible. It was difficult for Shao Chun to make an accurate response since he did not even know who the enemy was. Moreover, based on the current situation, the competitor was probably in the Great Thousand World, but Shao Chun did not know who it was. After hearing Shao Chun's words, Tenzu did not say much and left the ancestral land with Shao Chun. Fresh after returning to Tenzu's residence, Shao Chun's mood was obviously a little low. Seeing this, Tenzu also comforted him. "Actually, you don't have to be like this. Based on the current situation, you're still the most suitable person to become the world master of the Great Thousand World, and that so-called competitor doesn't have an advantage in many aspects." Tenzu's words were true. Shao Chun did have the advantage at the moment. As long as he fought steadily, there should not be any problems. As for that competitor, the only thing that gave Shao Chun a headache was his identity. As long as he could confirm his identity, Shao Chun might be able to kill him while he was still in the cradle to prevent future trouble. Unfortunately, Shao Chun still did not know who that person was, and it was impossible for him to kill all the people he suspected. Once he did so, it was bound to arouse public anger. Moreover, who could be sure that the competitor was among the people he suspected? Tenzu wanted to comfort Shao Chun, but Shao Chun also nodded slightly. "I know. Since things have come to this point, there's no other way. We can only try our best to find that person." Since things had come to this, and even the origin energy had to wait for the final result, Shao Chun could only do his best to compete for the position of the World Master. As soon as he finished speaking, Shao Chun smiled at Tenzu. "Okay, I should go back." "Okay." Hearing this, the Ancestor of Heaven nodded slightly and did not say much. The Ancestor of Heaven was powerless to do anything about the Great Thousand World. After all, it was related to the World Lord, and the Ancestor of Heaven did not have the ability to intervene. After bidding farewell to Tenzu, Shao Chun returned to the Great Thousand World. At the same time, in the Sword Sect of the Great Thousand World, Xianyuan Ling was personally responsible for finding that competitor. Under Xianyuan Ling's orders, the entire Sword Sect seemed to be operating at full speed. During this period, as the Sword Sect's control over the Great Thousand World grew stronger, various channels of information were constantly being perfected. The Sword Sect now had its own spies in the entire Great Thousand World, and they were able to find out a lot of secret matters. This was also a great help to Xianyuan Ling. This was the first time that Xianyuan Ling was only in charge of the Sword Sect. Although Xianyuan Ling had always been with Shao Chun, most of the time, Xianyuan Ling almost did not care about the Sword Sect's matters. Many people in the Sword Sect knew that Xianyuan Ling was very talented, and his cultivation had reached the Emperor Realm Grand Perfection. However, they still did not know much about Xianyuan Ling's other abilities. This time, as Xianyuan Ling personally went into battle, many people saw another side of Xianyuan Ling for the first time. Shao Chun should still remember what Li Tian said to him when he was in the Great Demon World. At that time, Shao Chun envied Cloud Palace for having a think tank like Li Tian. However, Li Tian told Shao Chun that the Sword Sect also had people like him, but Shao Chun had not discovered it yet. At that time, Shao Chun had been wondering if there was really someone comparable to Li Tian around him. This time, the strategy that Xianyuan Ling displayed shocked many people in the Sword Sect. Chapter 26:16. Xiao Chun naturally longed for someone like Li Tian. If a force had someone like Li Tian in charge, it would indeed be a lot more reassuring. Xiao Chun naturally longed for someone like Li Tian. If a force had someone like Li Tian in charge, it would indeed be a lot more reassuring. On the way back to the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chun did not directly rush to the Sword Sect. Instead, he went straight to the Saber Sect. Without any clues, Xiao Chun planned to wander around the Great Thousand World by himself. Of course, after seeing Dao Xiong and the others with his own eyes, he could confirm his guess. Xiao Chun planned to test Dao Xiong and the others personally. Although Dao Xiong and the others were currently his biggest threat, from a certain point of view, Dao Xiong and the others probably would not do such a thing. However, in the end, he still needed to see the final evidence. Since he had no idea where to start now, he might as well walk around. Perhaps there would be some surprises. Moreover, Xianyuan Ling and Song Xing were in charge of the Sword Sect. Even if Xiao Chen went back, it would not make much sense. At the moment, Xiao Chen was anxious to find out who was hiding in the dark. Who was the person chosen by the Dark Age to compete with him for the position of World Master? Xiao Chen was very anxious now. The feeling of not even knowing who the opponent was indeed very unbearable. Therefore, Xiao Chen obviously could not sit still when he was in love. Even Xiao Chen personally took action. The Sword Sect was even more frantic, launching a frantic investigation of all the Emperor Realm Masters in the Great Thousand World. Xiao Chun had previously requested to investigate in secret as much as possible. After all, everything now was just suspicion. If they made a big fuss and caused panic, there would be no benefits. However, such a large-scale and intensive investigation would obviously attract the attention of others. As a matter of fact, after Xiao Chun arrived at the Saber Sect, he immediately saw Dao Xiong and Dao Ju. After returning from the Great Thousand World, Dao Ju's improvement was obvious. However, at this moment, when the three of them sat together, the atmosphere was a little strange. Dao Xiong and Dao Ju both knew that the Sword Sect was investigating them, especially Dao Xiong. Recently, Dao Xiong could be said to have been under the Sword Sect's surveillance. However, although Dao Xiong was not happy about this, he did not stop it. Since he had already chosen to submit to the Sword Sect, it was impossible for him to attack the Sword Sect's spies. Of course, he was not happy. And Xiao Chun looked at Dao Xiong and said kindly, "Senior, there are some things that I can't tell you in detail right now. However, this is a matter of great importance, and I have no other choice. If I have offended you in any way, I hope you can forgive me." From Dao Xiong's reaction, there shouldn't be any problems. After all, Dao Xiong could be said to be calm when facing the Sword Sect spies. He didn't try to stop them at all and directly ignored them. He allowed the Sword Sect's spies to monitor him. Moreover, after seeing Dao Xiong with his own eyes, Xiao Chun secretly sensed Dao Xiong's current cultivation. He had made some progress, but it wasn't by much. It was a very normal situation. He could basically rule out the possibility of Dao Xiong being related to the Dark Age. After all, if Dao Xiong was really the person chosen by the Dark Age, then with the Dark Age's methods, they would definitely help Dao Xiong improve his cultivation. However, Dao Xiong's cultivation hadn't improved by much. Everything was normal. Because of this, Xiao Chun comforted him. Hearing this, Dao Xiong's expression became slightly better. Sect Master Xiao is too polite. Moreover, I don't have the right to refuse. After chatting with Dao Xiong for a while, and basically ruling Dao Xiong out of suspicion, Xiao Chen didn't stay any longer and quickly left. At the same time, in the Sword Sect, Xianyuan Ling, Song Xing, Nangong Guan, Zhou Song, and the others were also gathered in the main hall. During this period of crazy investigation, it could be said that they had covered almost the entire Great Thousand World. All the Emperor Realm Masters in the Great Thousand World were on the surveillance list, But after a period of monitoring, many Emperor Realm Masters didn't find anything. Everything was very normal. All the Emperor Realm Masters, whether it's their cultivation or their lifestyle, everything is normal. There's nothing suspicious about them. Song Xing frowned slightly and said somewhat gloomily. Everything was normal. Basically, it could be said that these people were ruled out of suspicion. This left everyone at a loss. Right now, they didn't know what to do. It was impossible to filter all the cultivators in the entire Great Thousand World. This was simply impossible. There was probably no clear number of cultivators in the entire Great Thousand World so far. Wanting to investigate all the cultivators in the entire Great Thousand World was simply a fantasy. No matter how strong the Sword Sect was, their energy was limited. The best they could do was to select a few suspicious people to investigate. This was already the limit. But so far, this method didn't seem to have worked because there was nothing strange about the people being investigated. After such a long period of strict monitoring, they still didn't find anything. When Song Xing said this, everyone present didn't know how to answer. In any case, everyone was now in a helpless situation. Only Xianyuan Ling was looking at a letter in his hand at this time and frowning slightly, as if he was thinking about something. The letter in Xianyuan Ling's hand was a very inconspicuous piece of information. It recorded that recently more than 1,000 cultivators had mysteriously disappeared. For the entire Great Thousand World, the disappearance of more than 1,000 cultivators wasn't a big deal. Furthermore, these cultivators weren't strong. They were basically unknown and ordinary cultivators who weren't outstanding at all. Hence, it was even more impossible for them to attract attention. However, it was this piece of information that didn't seem to have any value that attracted Xianyuan Ling's attention. Ignoring the complaints and helplessness of Song Xing and the others, Xianyuan Ling stared at the letter and pondered for a long time. It was only after a long while that Xianyuan Ling spoke. Has this information been confirmed? Suddenly hearing Xianyuan Ling's question, Song Xing and the others looked over. Seeing the letter in Xianyuan Ling's hand, Zhou Song spoke. It has been confirmed. There is indeed such a thing, but what does this have to do with us? These cultivators are all unknown and have no value at all. The contents of the letter, Song Xing, were naturally seen by Zhou Song and the others. However, no one cared about it. Now, because of Xiao Chen's matter, everyone was already very busy. How could they be in the mood to care about such a thing? Hearing Zhou Song's answer, Xianyuan Ling fell silent again. Seeing this, Song Xing asked, "What's wrong? What's strange about this information?" Chapter 26:17. Xianyuan Ling seemed to be very concerned about the disappearance of more than 1,000 cultivators. This puzzled Song Xing and the rest. After all, everyone's mission now was to find the person chosen by the Dark Age. This was the most important thing. If it were any other time, Song Xing and the rest would probably send people to investigate this matter. However, they did not have the energy or mood to do so now. However, in the face of everyone's doubts, Xianyuan Ling did not explain too much. He just looked at the letter in his hand and fell into deep thought. Xianyuan Ling did not speak. Song Xing and the rest were even more confused. It was not until a long while later that Xianyuan Ling raised his head. The expression in his eyes changed slightly. He said in a deep voice, "There's something wrong with the disappearance of these people." Hearing this, Song Xing and the rest were stunned again. What was the problem? They could not see the slightest problem with the disappearance of more than 1,000 people. This time, in the face of Song Xing and the rest's doubts, Xianyuan Ling explained. On the surface, these more than 1,000 people do not seem to have any interaction or relationship. However, these people's ages are about the same. Their ages were very close. However, after hearing this, Song Xing was somewhat puzzled. But what can this prove? Their ages were about the same. This could just be a coincidence. It could not prove anything at all. In this regard, Xianyuan Ling also nodded and admitted. Indeed, if it's just based on this point, it can't prove anything. However, there's another point. These cultivators are all individual cultivators and have no background. Moreover, the time of their disappearance is too close. Moreover, they all disappeared for no reason. If we combine the above points, I'm afraid this is not as simple as a coincidence. A simple suspicious point could be a coincidence. However, with so many suspicious points pieced together, it could not be described as a simple coincidence. There must be something wrong here. After hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Song Xing and the rest fell silent. Thinking about it carefully, it seemed to be the case. However, so what if there were suspicious points? The most important thing now was to complete the task given by Shao Chen. This was the most troublesome problem at the moment. Let's think about it. If the person chosen by the Dark Age wants to compete with the sect master for the position of world master, then he must have a group of useful people under him. Now that all the major forces in the Great Thousand World are basically under the surveillance of the Sword Sect, the Sword Sect will be able to detect any strange movements of these forces immediately. In this way, what's the best method? It's definitely a good choice. Of these cultivators are generally weak. But what if there's a special method to increase their strength? In that case, all the problems can be explained. I believe the Dark Age doesn't lack such methods. The major forces were indeed under the strict surveillance of the Sword Sect. Song Xing and the others knew this. Xianyuan Ling was right. In the face of such a situation, the best way was to choose useful people from the many cultivators. After hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, the expressions of Song Xing and the others changed slightly. If that was the case, then there was indeed a big problem with this matter. Of course, the most important thing was that everyone's current investigation had reached a dead end. Dao Xiong, Li Xiao, Luo Xing, Dan Qinyang, and the other known Emperor Realm Masters did not find anything suspicious after this period of investigation. To put it bluntly, their suspicions could basically be eliminated directly. The emperors did not have any abnormalities. This could only mean that there was something wrong with the direction of their investigation. At this time, Xianyuan Ling noticed this and was ready to start from a different angle. August 1st Chinese network, and at this time, the disappearance of more than 1,000 people naturally attracted Xianyuan Ling's attention. Although Xie Tian was very secretive when he took these people away, there would always be a loophole. As long as they followed this line of investigation, they should be able to find something. Of course, Xianyuan Ling could not be certain that these people were related to this matter. However, there was nothing wrong with investigating. After Xianyuan Ling's explanation, Song Xing and the others no longer objected. Then, Xianyuan Ling spoke. Everything else will be as usual. I'll investigate this matter personally. The investigation of the emperors could not be completed yet. Because of the importance of this matter, Xianyuan Ling and the others did not dare to make a conclusion easily. However, the disappearance of more than 1,000 people was very strange. Xianyuan Ling planned to investigate this matter personally. In this regard, Song Xing and the others nodded in agreement. For a time, the direction of the Sword Sect's investigation also changed, starting from the disappearance of more than 1,000 people. Xie Tian probably did not know that he had attracted Xianyuan Ling's attention so quickly. In fact, when he was doing this series of things, he was very secretive. He thought that he should have done it flawlessly, but it was still the same sentence. There would always be a loophole, not to mention that he met Xianyuan Ling. From a seemingly simple matter, Xianyuan Ling was not confused by the surface. Instead, he was keenly aware of the hidden problem, so he decided to investigate this matter thoroughly without hesitation. At this time, Xie Tian was still hiding in the valley, waiting for the cultivation of more than 1,000 people to finish. To compete with Shao Chen, Xie Tian needed a group of people he could use. If he was alone, Xie Tian knew that he could not compete with Shao Chen and the Sword Sect. From the beginning, he did not think of looking for the large powers of the Great Thousand World because Xie Tian knew that once he contacted those powers, it would be very easy for the Sword Sect to find out. At that time, it was very likely that he would be exposed. For Xie Tian, there were no benefits at all. So, Xie Tian chose those rogue cultivators without any background. Moreover, he used the special methods of the Dark Era to increase their strength. Like this, he could ensure the loyalty of these people and also not attract the attention of the Sword Sect. It was a method that satisfied both sides. But Xie Tian never thought that his methods would still attract Xian Yuanling's attention. Moreover, Xian Yuanling had already begun investigating this matter. Xie Tian wanted to hide in the dark and wait for an opportunity to make a move, but how could Xian Yuanling give him this chance? Any existence that could threaten Shao Chen, Xian Yuanling would destroy them without any hesitation. A faint smile hung on Xian Yuanling's face as he looked at the thousands of cultivators sitting cross-legged in the blood pool with their eyes closed. He had no idea that Xian Yuanling had already begun to investigate this matter. He even muttered with satisfaction, "Soon. In another half a month, they will come out of closed-door cultivation." Since he began increasing the cultivation of these people, it had already been a month. Feeling the aura coming from these people, Xie Tian nodded in satisfaction. In another half a month, these people would come out of closed-door cultivation. Chapter 26:18. Xie Tian still hadn't discovered the Sword Sect's movements, and this was his greatest disadvantage, which was that he didn't have his own information channels. Xie Tian still hadn't discovered the Sword Sect's movements, and this was his greatest disadvantage, which was that he didn't have his own information channels. After all, the evil God Palace had already been exterminated and the evil martial artists from before had all been killed by the Sword Sect and the other large powers. Even if there were fish that escaped the net, they wouldn't dare show themselves at this time. Moreover, Xie Tian couldn't deliberately look for these evil martial artists because if he did, Xie Tian would be exposed. Without his own information channels, Xie Tian had no way of knowing the movements of the Sword Sect, and he also didn't know that Xian Yuanling had already set his eyes on these missing martial artists. Under Xian Yuanling's orders, there were quite a few deacons from the Sword Sect that went to the cities or homes of these martial artists to investigate. Moreover, Xian Yuanling had overlooked a problem before, which was that the places where these missing martial artists lived were not that far from each other. It could be said that they lived in the same state and the distance between them was at most a few cities. This discovery made Xian Yuanling even more suspicious that there was a problem with the disappearance of these martial artists. They were so close to each other, and their disappearances were so concentrated. This was definitely not a coincidence. But what made Xian Yuanling's head hurt was that as the investigation continued, the families and friends of these missing martial artists couldn't provide any useful clues at all. First, they didn't know why these people disappeared. Did they go somewhere on their own or were taken away by someone else? Perhaps it was some other possibility, but these people didn't know anything. Second, when these people disappeared, no one saw anything. It was like they had disappeared into thin air. Not only did they ask the friends and family of these martial artists, the Sword Sect's deacons also asked the local city lord's palace. In this period of time, the city lord's palace didn't find anything strange and they didn't see any strange people. It was clearly very suspicious, but there were no clues or evidence, so the investigation seemed to have reached a deadlock. But while the Sword Sect was investigating these missing martial artists, there were some people who were panicking. These people were the sect masters of the large sects and families that had contact with Xie Tian. They had seen Xie Tian, and although they didn't rely on Xie Tian, they had provided quite a bit of information to Xie Tian. If the Sword's Gate were to find out about this, the consequences would be dire. In addition, the experts of the Sword's Gate had been investigating in the nearby cities, which made these people even more anxious. They were afraid that they would be exposed because of this. These people were not Xie Tian's companions and did not have any relations with Xie Tian, but they had seen Xie Tian before. This was fine, but they had been hiding this matter the entire time, so their hearts were filled with panic. They didn't know if the sword zessest or zessestit, but based on the current situation, the possibility of it being a coincidence was too low. Because if it was a coincidence, the sword sex people wouldn't have been investigating the surrounding cities. This was clearly not logical. The only possibility was that the sword sect had some information and had a general goal. But what this goal or clue was, these people didn't know, and this was what they were most worried about. It was a bit like scaring themselves, but there was no other way. Their hearts were filled with guilt, so naturally they were worried about being exposed. The sword sect hadn't noticed the abnormalities of these families and sects for now. As for Xianyuan Ling, he had been paying attention to the progress of this matter, but after several days, he still hadn't found a single clue. This made Xianyuan Ling's mood even more depressed. Could it be that I was wrong? Not finding a single clue, Xianyuan Ling couldn't help doubting himself. But all the signs indicated that there was indeed a problem with this matter, and it was very likely that there was a big secret hidden, so Xianyuan Ling didn't give up, and even continued to strengthen his efforts, vowing to get to the bottom of the disappearance of these warriors. In fact, there was nothing wrong with Xianyuan Ling's, or rather, Xianyuan Ling had long guessed the truth, but unfortunately, he didn't have any evidence. Just as Xianyuan Ling was secretly frustrated, an elder suddenly came to the door with a shocked expression on his face. At a glance, it was obvious that this elder must have found something. Xianyuan Ling immediately asked, "What's wrong, did you find something?" This elder was now one of the people in charge of investigating these missing warriors. Since he came personally, there must be something to report. Xianyuan Ling couldn't help but be excited and look forward to it. Faced with Xianyuan Ling's inquiry, the elder's excitement didn't diminish at all. He said excitedly to Xianyuan Ling, "There is indeed a discovery, and it's a pleasant surprise." "Oh, tell me about it." "When our people were investigating the missing warriors, they found a local big family. We originally planned to ask about these missing warriors, but who would have thought that we would find something else?" Something else? According to this patriarch, Xie Tian came personally a month ago. Under Xie Tian's threat, they couldn't help but think that he had provided some information. Perhaps because he was afraid of being exposed, this patriarch took the initiative to admit everything. Xie Tian? Hearing these two words, Xianyuan Ling suddenly stood up, his eyes filled with shock. Who would have thought that it would actually be Xie Tian? In the battle to destroy the evil god palace, Xie Tian had already been killed by Tian Fa, but he actually didn't die. Xie Tian's appearance made Xianyuan Ling suddenly feel enlightened. If it really was Xie Tian, then everything made sense. From the beginning, when everyone found nothing, to now when Xie Tian was exposed, everything could be explained. It was no wonder that no one had been able to find anything from the start of their investigation. Those Emperor Realm Masters had no connection to Dark Age at all, and the person chosen by Dark Age was not these Emperor Realm Masters, but Xie Tian. In fact, it also made sense. Xie Tian was indeed the most suitable candidate. First of all, he was from the Great Thousand World, there was no doubt about this. Second, Xie Tian was Shao Chen's opponent before. Compared to Dao Ju, Li Xiao, Luo Xing, and the others, Xie Tian was more suitable. A complicated look appeared in Xianyuan Ling's eyes. He looked into the distance and whispered softly, "So it was him. Then it makes sense. How stupid, I didn't guess it earlier." It was definitely a pleasant surprise. Who would have thought that the patriarch of a big family would actually take the initiative to admit these things? Or perhaps he was too afraid, so he chose to take the initiative to confess. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. Chapter 26:19. Xie Tian's appearance filled Xianyuan Ling's heart with joy, but there was also a trace of vigilance. After all, a person who should have died a long time ago was actually not dead. Like this, it was most likely the work of those old fellows from the Dark Age. Xie Tian's appearance filled Xianyuan Ling's heart with joy, but there was also a trace of vigilance. After all, a person who should have died a long time ago was actually not dead. Like this, it was most likely the work of those old fellows from the Dark Age. If it was Xie Tian, Xianyuan Ling was not unfamiliar with him. In the boundless world, Xie Tian was someone who could almost destroy all the large powers. Muttering in a soft voice, Xianyuan Ling looked at the elder in front of him and spoke in a deep voice. Focus on investigating the surrounding large powers and see who has been in contact with Xie Tian. Other than that, if you confess, we can let bygones be bygones, but if anyone deliberately hides, don't blame my sword sect for being ruthless. Since this large family had been in contact with Xie Tian, it wasn't just them. There were other powers that had been in contact with Xie Tian, so Xianyuan Ling focused his investigation on these powers. First find out which powers had been in contact with Xie Tian, and then follow the clues to find where Xie Tian was hiding. The reason why he said he wouldn't pursue this matter was to make these powers take the initiative to tell the truth. If they had only been in contact with Xie Tian and helplessly provided some information, it wasn't a big deal to forgive them. But if there were people secretly colluding with Xie Tian, that was an unforgivable crime. Hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, the elder respectfully replied before giving a bow and leaving the courtyard. There was a breakthrough in this matter. Although there was no concrete evidence, Xianyuan Ling was at least 80% certain that the person chosen by the Dark Age was Xie Tian. First, Xie Tian was an evil cultivator. The others clearly knew the situation of the boundless world and still dared to come, so they definitely had a goal. This goal was most likely to be to fight for the position of the World Master. Only, what Xianyuan Ling cared about the most right now was what kind of help the Dark Age had given Xie Tian and what kind of cultivation he had after coming back from the dead. If I remember correctly, Xie Tian should have broken through to the Ancestor realm back then. Muttering softly, Xianyuan Ling immediately sent a message to Shao Chun. Xie Tian's appearance was not a small matter. The sword sect should follow this lead and try to find Xie Tian as soon as possible. Shao Chun outside, after receiving Xianyuan Ling's message, his expression changed. He never thought that he would find Xie Tian in the end. Without any delay, he quickly returned to the sword sect. In the sword sect's main hall, according to Xianyuan Ling's orders, the sword sect's main investigation was focused on the large powers in the area. Under the investigation of the sword sect, there were indeed 7-8 powers that had secretly contacted Xie Tian. At that moment, with the return of Shao Chun, everyone gathered together and sat on the main seat. Shao Chun asked Xianyuan Ling, who was seated below, "Are you certain that these powers have not secretly sided with Xie Tian?" After investigating these 7-8 powers, they were certain that they and Xie Tian had not secretly sided with Xie Tian. Only because of Xie Tian's deterrence, they had no choice but to provide some information. There were some sect masters and sect masters who wanted to report this matter to the sword sect, but since it involved Xie Tian, they were afraid that the sword sect would punish them, so they were hesitant. This time, Xianyuan Ling said that he would let bygones be bygones if they were willing to confess. So, the sect masters and sect masters of these 7 powers directly confessed everything. Of course, Xianyuan Ling could not just believe their side of the story. He had sent people to investigate them and found that they had not colluded with Xie Tian. We can be certain that there isn't. So hearing Shao Chun's words, Xianyuan Ling simply nodded in response. These powers had not colluded with Xie Tian, so they could be forgiven this time. Giving a slight nod, Shao Chun asked, "Then do you have any traces of Xie Tian?" Xie Tian's whereabouts was what Shao Chun cared about the most. Since they were certain that Xie Tian was in the boundless world, Then finding him was the most important problem. But Xianyuan Ling shook his head at this. The search for Xie Tian's whereabouts had already begun. Xianyuan Ling had used the power of the Sword Sect to search for Xie Tian's whereabouts in the boundless world, but up until now, there had been no news at all. Not finding any clues about Xie Tian made Xianyuan Ling feel very helpless. Seeing Xianyuan Ling shake his head, Shao Chun fell into deep thought. After a while, he said to everyone present, "Then stop investigating the others. Use all your strength and dig 3 feet into the ground to find where Xie Tian is." Since they could basically conclude that there was no problem with Dao Xiong, Li Shao, Dan Qingyang, and the other emperors, there was no need to continue wasting time on them. Gathering all their strength to find Xie Tian was the most important thing right now. Xianyuan Ling did not refuse Shao Chen's decision. He had planned to do this anyway. At this time, it was meaningless to continue investigating Dao Xiong and the others. They would use all their strength to find Xie Tian's whereabouts. After everyone finished discussing this matter, Shao Chun and Xianyuan Ling left the main hall together. Along the way, Shao Chun looked at Xianyuan Ling with a faint smile. From this matter, Shao Chun could clearly feel that Xianyuan Ling was very meticulous. Thinking of Li Tian's words, Shao Chun felt a different feeling in his heart. Shao Chun envied Cloud Palace for having an existence like Li Tian, but Li Tian had told Shao Chun that he also had such a person by his side, but he had never noticed it. Perhaps this person was Xianyuan Ling. After being together with Xianyuan Ling for so long, Shao Chun naturally knew that Xianyuan Ling was very intelligent, but he had never thought of Xianyuan Ling as a think tank. Perhaps it was because of their relationship. After all, Xianyuan Ling was his big brother, so Shao Chun had subconsciously ignored this point. "Why do you keep staring at me?" Noticing Shao Chun's gaze, Xianyuan Ling asked in a strange voice. In this regard, Shao Chun smiled and said, "I just realized that I had always underestimated Big Brother. Big Brother can be the think tank of my sword sect." Shao Chun's words were sincere. In this regard, Xianyuan Ling curled his lips and did not say anything. In this regard, Shao Chun teased him with a smile. "If I knew that Big Brother was so capable, I wouldn't be so tired. However, I'll have to trouble Big Brother to worry about the sword sect in the future. Come on, this is an important matter. I'm also being forced to do something beyond my ability. This kind of thankless matter, don't look for me in the future." Hearing this, Xianyuan Ling also scolded with a smile. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of this chapter. Chapter 26-20. The two of them walked back to their residence while talking and laughing. To be honest, Shao Chun was very happy with Xianyuan Ling's strategy this time. The two of them walked back to their residence while talking and laughing. To be honest, Shao Chun was very happy with Xianyuan Ling's strategy this time. In the following days, Shao Chun did not leave the sword sect and waited for the results of the search. This matter was naturally left to Xianyuan Ling to take care of. The entire sword sect was wildly searching for Xie Tian's whereabouts. Not only was it the sword sect, even the saber sect, Moon Palace, Dan Valley, and the other large powers were participating in this. When they learned from the sword sect that Xie Tian was not dead and had returned to the boundless world, other than being shocked, the large powers all began to take care of this matter, wanting to find Xie Tian's whereabouts. After all, for the large powers of the Great Thousand World, Xie Tian was their common enemy, and he was a very terrifying enemy. The tragedy of the war between good and evil in the past, as well as the losses it brought to the Great Thousand World, no one had forgotten about it. No one wanted to experience that kind of war again. So, for a potential threat like Xie Tian, the Saber Sect, Dan Valley, Moon Palace, and the other large powers all had the same idea as the sword sect. They had to kill him in the cradle. They definitely could not give Xie Tian and the evil martial artists any chance of reviving. There was no need to kill any danger in the cradle, this was the best method. All the powers of the boundless world began to move, and there were martial artists all around searching for Xietian. It could be said that the entire boundless world was covered in an inescapable net, looking like they had to dig 3 feet into the ground to find Xietian. Only, even if the Sword Sect and the other large powers made a big move, after several days, they still did not find any clues about Xietian's whereabouts. Being in charge of searching for Xietian, Xianyuan Ling was very busy these past few days, and Xiao Qin was much more relaxed. He hadn't rested for a few days. Every day, Xianyuan Ling had to check the information gathered from various places. However, none of this information was good news for Xianyuan Ling. After reading the information from various places once again, Xianyuan Ling frowned slightly and said, "All the major cities have been searched so many times, but there's still no news." That's right. According to the intensity of our search, if the evil sky god is in the Great Thousand Era, he definitely won't be able to escape our search. Song Xing and the others, as well as several Sword Sect elders, agreed. The intensity of the search this time was no joke. If Xietian was really hiding in the Great Thousand World, it would be impossible for him to escape detection. However, there was no trace of him so far, which made everyone feel somewhat helpless. Large streets and small alleys, even going from house to house, not even letting off a normal family. But even like this, it was like Xietian had disappeared from the world. Regarding this, Wu Wan had some guesses. Do you think that Xietian has already left the Great Thousand World? Perhaps Xietian had already left the Great Thousand World. Regarding this, Xianyuan Ling shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be possible. Since Xietian dares to return to the Great Thousand World, how could he leave without doing anything?" Xianyuan Ling didn't think that Xietian would leave the Great Thousand World this easily, otherwise, why would he risk coming back? Reading Book Pavilion after thinking for a bit, Xianyuan Ling finally said, "I think that not only the cities, we should increase our search in other places as well. Including those desolate places without people, I'm afraid that will be the focus of our search." Since there were no traces of Xietian in the major cities, they could only increase their search range. However, everyone was a bit hesitant about this. If it's like this, then it will be much more difficult. We have to think of a way to complete it no matter how hard it is. If we don't find Xietian, it will always be dangerous. Xianyuan Ling replied to this. Searching the entire Great Thousand World, even searching those desolate places, this was without a doubt a large project. However, there was no other way. If they wanted to find Xietian, they could only do this. Xianyuan Ling's order was quickly passed down, and the various major forces of the Great Thousand World once again expanded the scope of their search. Furthermore, according to Xianyuan Ling's instructions, the focus of the search shifted from the various major cities to the desolate and uninhabited places. The various large powers wildly searched for Xietian's whereabouts, and at the same time, the evil path remnants hidden in various places began to move. These evil path remnants had used various methods to escape the large powers' search. Although there weren't many of them, with Xietian's return, there was a fire burning in their hearts again. After all, no one wanted to live like a rat on the street. Xietian's return gave them a large amount of confidence, as if they could see the scene of the evil path being reborn from the ashes. These evil path cultivators also wanted to find Xietian and fight with him against the various large powers. However, they didn't dare show themselves now. After all, as long as they showed themselves, they would face the endless pursuit of the various large powers of the Great Thousand World. The entire vast Thousand World was currently caught in an unprecedented search. This kind of search was probably the first time it had appeared in the vast Thousand World. All the powers had joined in and could be seen everywhere. Groups of martial artists were searching for Xietian's whereabouts. Xietian naturally noticed such a large-scale search, But the current Xietian couldn't do anything because the 1,000 cultivators had reached the most critical moment and Xietian couldn't move at all. It was still that desolate valley. Looking at the 1,000 cultivators in front of him, some of them had already broken through to the Emperor realm, and others had just broken through to the End realm. This was the final step and also the most critical step. If it was destroyed now, everything would be for naught. So, even though he knew that the Sword Sect was searching for him, Xietian couldn't move at all. After spending this much time and energy, Xietian couldn't give up on these 1,000 people because they were his confidence in fighting against Shao Chen. Without these people, with just Xietian alone, it would be very hard for him to fight against Shao Chen and the Sword Sect. The aura of these 1,000 people, compared to a month ago, it was unknown how much stronger they were. The methods of the Dark Era had truly shocked Xietian. Looking at these 1,000 people, a cold light flashed in Xietian's eyes as he muttered, "I hope there's still time." As long as these 1,000 people came out of closed-door cultivation, then even if his location was exposed, Xietian wouldn't be afraid. He just hoped that the people from the Sword Sect and the other large powers wouldn't find this place so quickly. Time, what Xietian needed right now was time. He just needed a bit more time. Chapter 26-21. Xietian had no way of moving right now, but the only thing worth rejoicing about was that these 1,000 people would only need a few days to come out of closed-door cultivation. Even if they were found by the Sword Sect at that time, Xietian would have the strength to fight them. Actually, Xietian was not afraid of fighting Shao Chen and the Sword Sect. Since returning to the large world and participating in the competition for the World Master position, Xietian knew that there would be a fight between him and Shao Chen. There was no doubt about this. Only right now, these 1,000 people had not come out of closed-door cultivation, so it was clearly not the time to fight. If the Sword Sect destroyed them at this time, these 1,000 people would all die. Although the Dark Era's methods were strange, they had their own weaknesses. During this process, no one could disturb them. What the evil spirits lacked the most right now was time, but the Sword Sect was approaching step by step and the entire large world was searching for him. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before they found this place. He secretly prayed in his heart, but Xietian also knew that he was lying to himself. He had to think of a way to stall for time, otherwise if these 1,000 people couldn't come out, all his plans would be for naught. To stall for time, Xietian actually didn't have any other choice. The only thing he could do was to use himself as bait, only then would he be able to stall for time. To put it bluntly, Xietian would take the initiative to expose himself and attract the attention of the Sword Sect. When the time came, the Sword Sect would not pay attention to anything else. But like this, the danger was still very large. But based on the current situation, Xietian did not have any other choice. If these 1,000 people were found by the Sword Sect before they came out, everything would be for naught. Thinking of this, Xietian also stood up and disappeared on the spot. The Sword Sect's search continued, and they were getting closer and closer to the valley Xietian was in. Not long after leaving the valley, Xietian met a group of Sword Sect disciples. There was a deacon leading them, and there weren't many of them, only around 10 people in total. At this time, the 10 Sword Gate disciples were searching for Xietian's whereabouts while chatting with each other. "You're saying that Xietian will be in these places? This place is deserted. Not many people come here at all. Who knows? But this is the sect master's order. We can only carry it out." As he spoke, an indifferent voice came from the front. "Are you looking for me?" With these words, Xietian's figure appeared out of thin air in front of everyone. Towards Xietian, these Sword Sect disciples were not unfamiliar with him. In each of their hands there was a portrait of Xietian. All of a sudden, everyone's expression changed drastically. The deacon in the lead immediately took out his voice-transmitting talisman and prepared to send the news back to the Sword Sect. Regarding this, Xietian did not stop him. After all, his goal was to use himself to draw away the sword sect members. When the deacon used his voice-transmitting talisman, Xietian revealed a faint smile and made his move. He easily killed this group of sword sect disciples. Xietian had finally appeared. In the sword sect, after Xianyuan Ling received this news, he immediately told Shao Chun. Regarding this, Shao Chun immediately said, "I'll personally go. Other than that, I'll have the others seal off the area, we can't let him escape." To deal with Xietian, Shao Chun had to personally go. Although he couldn't confirm Xietian's current cultivation, Shao Chun estimated that he was at least in the Ancestor Realm. Facing an Ancestor Realm expert like Xietian, the other members of the Sword Sect were definitely not his match. Only Shao Chun and Jun Wuya could fight him. Shao Chun personally left the Sword Sect and rushed to where Xietian had appeared. At the same time, the experts of the Sword Sect kept gathering there. Only, Xietian was not waiting in the same place. After killing this group of Sword Sect disciples, in just a day, Xietian appeared in another city 10,000 miles away and directly destroyed it. Xietian did not have any intentions of hiding his whereabouts, and his actions were incomparably high profile. Destroying a city was without a doubt telling the Sword Sect where he was. Following Xietian's movements, the Sword Sect members gradually formed an encirclement. But before this encirclement could be formed, Xietian was already prepared to break out. Naturally, it was impossible for him to be surrounded by the Sword Sect since he was alone. If he was surrounded by the Sword Sect, even Xietian would be in danger. Xietian's goal was to pin down the Sword Sect, otherwise the Sword Sect would have the time to pay attention to other places, giving the 1,000 people enough time to escape. He wanted to break out of the encirclement. The Qinling mountain range was an important part of the encirclement, so naturally there were experts of the Sword Sect guarding it. Song Xing and Zhou Song were personally guarding it. On this day, Song Xing and Zhou Song had just finished a night of cultivation when a terrifying pressure appeared in the sky. The two of them did not have time to think as they charged into the sky. At the same time, there were many Sword Sect disciples. The one who had come was Xietian. Seeing Xietian, Song Xing and Zhou Song's faces sank, but Xietian revealed a cold smile as he said, "Song Xing, Zhou Song, ha ha." It was a simple cold smile, but the killing intent in his voice was self-evident. Hearing this, Song Xing and Zhou Song did not dare act carelessly. Although the two of them were Emperor Realm Masters, Xietian's strength could not be compared to theirs. Xietian chose to break out of the Qinling mountain range because he was not willing to let the Sword Sect completely surround him. Xietian wanted to use his flexibility to keep the Sword Sect's strength tied down, making it impossible for the Sword Sect to surround him. Song Xing and Zhou Song had obviously guessed Xietian's intentions. At this time, Song Xing sent a message to Zhou Song, "Delay him. Sect Master will definitely arrive in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea." Shao Chun had naturally been chasing after Xietian these past few days, but unfortunately, Shao Chun did not have a way to accurately pinpoint Xietian's position, so he was always a step behind. This time, facing the Sword Sect's encirclement, Xietian could only take the risk of breaking out. Song Xing and Zhou Song's mission was to delay him. It wouldn't take long, just the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. When that time came, Shao Chun would naturally arrive. Seeing that the two of them had no intention of making a move, Xietian knew that they wanted to stall for time, so without any hesitation, Xietian made the first move. "You want to stall for time, but it's a pity that your strength is still a bit lacking." Directly sending out a punch, the pressure of an Ancestor Realm cultivation erupted. Just facing Xietian's pressure alone, Song Xing and Zhou Song felt their scalps tingle. But right now, it was impossible for the two of them to retreat, so facing Xietian's punch, the two of them could only use all their strength to block it. seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. This chapter ends. Chapter 26-22. Song Xing and Zhou Song definitely wouldn't back down. If Xie Tian escaped, it would be even more troublesome to find him in the future, so facing Xie Tian's punch, the two of them could only grit their teeth and fight to the death. Song Xing and Zhou Song definitely wouldn't back down. If Xie Tian escaped, it would be even more troublesome to find him in the future, so facing Xie Tian's punch, the two of them could only grit their teeth and fight to the death. The news had already been sent to Xiao Chen, so as long as Xiao Chen rushed over, there would be nothing left for them to do. Seeing the two of them actually want to fight him head-on, Xie Tian gave a cold snort. Humph, mayflies trying to shake a tree, seeking death. Xie Tian's current cultivation had definitely reached the ancestor realm. It was different from Hermit Mo's previous methods, which made Xie Tian look like he was just a facade and even wasted his innate potential. The methods of those old fellows from the Dark Era were naturally not something Hermit Mo could compare to. With the help of those old fellows from the Dark Era, Xie Tian could be said to have been refined from inside out, completely different from before. It was because of this that Xie Tian had the confidence to fight for the position of World Master with Xiao Chen. At this moment, facing Song Xing and Zhou Song's obstruction, Xie Tian did not hide the killing intent in his heart. In his eyes, Song Xing and Zhou Song were mayflies trying to shake a tree, not knowing life and death. Trifling Emperor Realm cultivators daring to block him, what was this if not seeking death? Sending out a punch, even if Song Xing and Zhou Song worked together, when the attacks of the three collided, it was clear that Song Xing and Zhou Song did not have the ability to block Xie Tian's punch at all. The gap between the two sides was very large, so large that it was already exaggerated. Facing this, Zhou Song angrily roared, "Attack together and block him." The two of them had underestimated the strength of an ancestor realm master. It was very difficult for the two of them to block Xie Tian, so there was no other way. They could only have the surrounding sword sect members attack together and gather everyone's strength, only then would they have a chance of stalling Xie Tian. Hearing Zhou Song's words, the surrounding sword sect disciples, elders, and deacons all attacked together. Gathering everyone's strength, they finally blocked Xie Tian's attack. But even like this, when this attack fell, there were still quite a few people from the sword sect who had fallen. But this was already a very good result. After all, everyone had successfully blocked Xie Tian's attack. But this was only the beginning. Seeing his attack being blocked, Xie Tian's face became even more gloomy. He knew Song Xing and Zhou Song's goal, so Xie Tian did not have much time to waste. He had to break out of the encirclement before Xiao Chen arrived, otherwise the situation would become even more disadvantageous for him. Xie Tian currently wanted to deal with the sword sect and not fight to the death with the sword sect. So, for the current situation, Xie Tian did not have any intention of facing Xiao Chen. After all, Xiao Chen was not a crooked melon. Even if he had been reborn, if he faced Xiao Chen, to be honest, Xie Tian did not have any confidence in winning. Thinking of this, Xie Tian did not give Song Xing, Zhou Song, and the others a chance to breathe. He attacked wave after wave, not holding back at all. Even if they gathered everyone's strength, facing Xie Tian's wild attacks, they soon found it hard to hold on. The strength of an ancestor realm master was not something that could be defeated by numbers. Of course, if there were over 100 Emperor Realm Masters attacking together without any fear of death, there might be a chance. The unique Chinese network, however, this was only a possibility. Even if they succeeded in the end, at least half of the 100 Emperor Realm Masters would be killed. Not to mention, there were only 2 Emperor Realm Masters, Song Xing and Zhou Song. As for the others, they could be ignored and there was no need to care about them at all. The line of defense had been forcibly torn apart by Xie Tian, and Song Xing and Zhou Song were vomiting blood from the corners of their mouths. Their auras were chaotic, as if they had been seriously injured. Seeing that Song Xing and Zhou Song were seriously injured, Xie Tian was even more unforgiving. He rushed forward, wanting to kill the two of them in one fell swoop. Xie Tian was not unfamiliar with the two of them, knowing that they were the mainstays of the sword sect. If he could kill the two of them, it would be a big blow to the sword sect. Seeing Xie Tian rush forward, a terrifying pressure enveloped the two of them, not giving them any chance to break free. For a moment, Song Xing and Zhou Song were powerless to resist. The two of them could only accept the result of being killed by Xie Tian. However, just as Xie Tian was about to attack and the two of them were about to be killed, a sword slashed out and successfully blocked Xie Tian's attack, saving Song Xing and Zhou Song in the nick of time. Xie Tian, you really made it difficult for me to find you. Along with the sword, a cold laugh came from the sky and a black figure flew over. The person who came was no one else but Xiao Chen. After receiving Song Xing's message, Xiao Chen had immediately rushed over. In order to save time, Xiao Chen had come alone and did not bring anyone else. He wanted to kill Song Xing and Zhou Song, but who would have thought that Xiao Chen would catch up in the end? Seeing the safe and sound Song Xing and Zhou Song, Xie Tian's expression became very ugly. At this time, he still had a chance to kill the two of them, but once he did, he would be entangled by Xiao Chen. It would not be easy for him to escape at that time. Once he couldn't escape immediately, the sword sect's people would definitely surround him. Even if Xie Tian wasn't afraid of fighting Xiao Chen, one couldn't forget that the sword sect still had Junwuya. If Junwuya came, Xie Tian really didn't have any confidence in fighting one against two. Using his life to exchange for Song Xing and Zhou Song's lives or letting them go for now, this choice for Xie Tian was not hard at all. So, without any hesitation, Xie Tian gave up on making a move against Zhou Song and Xie Tian. With a flash, he wildly ran out of the encirclement. Xie Tian naturally wasn't willing to gamble. After all, killing Song Xing and Zhou Song didn't mean much to Xie Tian. As long as Xiao Chen didn't die, the sword sect wouldn't fall. So, Xie Tian wouldn't put himself in danger because of Song Xing and Zhou Song. Seeing Xie Tian quickly running away, Xiao Chen didn't stop at all as he chased after him. At the same time, he shouted in a cold voice, "Xie Tian, do you think you can still run this time? I want to see just how many lives you have to die." Xie Tian was indeed like a cockroach that couldn't be killed. From the first war between good and evil to the second war between good and evil, Xie Tian had already died twice, but he always came back from the dead. Especially this time. Even though Tian's punishment had already killed him, who would have thought that he still wasn't dead? Xiao Chen admired Xie Tian's tenacious vitality, but so what? No matter how many lives Xie Tian had, this time, Xiao Chen wouldn't give him a chance to come back from the dead. He would consign him to eternal damnation this time. Chapter 26-23. After Xiao Chen arrived, Xie Tian's first reaction was to run away. He was even disinclined to pay attention to Song Xing and Zhou Song. Seeing this, Xiao Chen naturally would not let Xie Tian leave this easily. He also did not care about the injuries of Song Xing and Zhou Song as he chased after Xie Tian. After learning that the person chosen by the Dark Arrow was Xie Tian, the killing intent in Xiao Chen's heart was very strong. This was because to Xiao Chen, Xie Tian's threat was much bigger than the others. So even if there was only a trace of a chance, Xiao Chen would use all his strength to kill Xie Tian. He would not give him any chance to make a comeback. Xie Tian could already be considered an old enemy and this fellow's life was very hard. He also had many methods, so this kind of threat had to be killed in the cradle. Xie Tian was very fast and Xiao Chen was moving as fast as he could. The two of them, one in front and one behind, instantly moved very far away. Seeing Xiao Chen chasing after him, Xie Tian's face was very dark. Seeing the two of them getting closer and closer, how could Xie Tian not know what Xiao Chen was thinking? Seeing Xiao Chen like this, he was determined to kill him. Even if he had to pay a price, Xiao Chen would not hesitate at all. Xiao Chen was indeed thinking like this. In order to kill Xie Tian, Xiao Chen was willing to pay a price. Even if the price was very serious, so what? As long as he could kill Xie Tian, it was all worth it. The distance between them closed step by step. When Xie Tian entered Xiao Chen's attack range, Xiao Chen did not hesitate to send out a slash with his sword. The tip of the slash flew out, aiming at Xie Tian's back. Feeling the dense killing intent coming from behind him, Xie Tian had no choice but to dodge to the side. After all, Xie Tian did not have the courage to ignore Xiao Chen's attack. If he was hit by Xiao Chen's sword, Xie Tian would be heavily injured. It was also because of this dodge that Xie Tian's speed became much slower. Xiao Chen seized this chance and directly jumped forward, successfully catching up to Xie Tian. Moreover, he launched an attack without any explanation. "I already said that you won't be able to leave today," he said coldly. His hands did not stop attacking. Faced with Xiao Chen's attack, Xie Tian saw that there was no hope of escaping, so he could only make a move to resist. The two of them instantly began to fight. Meeting again, Xiao Chen was no longer the brat from before. Xiao Chen's cultivation was the same as Xie Tian's, reaching the ancestor realm. Facing an opponent that Chen Jin could only look up to, Xiao Chen could already fight with him. Under Xiao Chen's fierce attacks, Xie Tian was at a disadvantage for a while. The main reason was because Xie Tian did not have any intention of fighting to the death with Xiao Chen right now. Those over 1,000 cultivators had not come out yet, and Xie Tian did not want to be entangled with Xiao Chen at this time. Moreover, what Xie Tian was most worried about was the other ancestor realm expert in the sword sect, which was Xiao Chen's master, Junwei. Although Junwei had not appeared yet, Xie Tian could not ignore him. Once Junwei arrived, Xie Tian would not be able to deal with two ancestor realm experts at the same time. There were also so many experts in the Sword's Gate. Although these experts wouldn't enter Xie Tian's eyes under normal circumstances, now that Xiao Chen and Jun Wuya were holding them back, if Xie Tian still had to divert his attention to deal with the other people in the Sword's Gate, it would simply be seeking death. 61 Many ants can bite an elephant to death. These words were not empty words. Not to mention the fact that the Sword Sect could become the ruler of the boundless world, how could they lack experts? If these people all charged at him, even Xie Tian would find it hard to fight against them with two fists. It was because of this that Xie Tian did not want to fight to the death with Xiao Chen at this time. If he wanted to fight against Xiao Chen and the Sword Sect, Xie Tian was very clear that he could only rely on those over 1,000 cultivators. Only when they came out of seclusion and he had a group of people under him could he fight against the alliance. As for now, with just Xie Tian alone, it was indeed hard for him to fight alone. Xie Tian wanted to avoid this fight, but Xiao Chen did not give him a chance. After entangling Xie Tian, Xiao Chen's attacks could be said to be very fierce, as if he would not stop until he died. Under Xiao Chen's wild attacks, it could be said that Xie Tian was suffering. He wanted to escape, but he did not have a chance and Xiao Chen did not give him a chance. There were many times when Xiao Chen did not hesitate to exchange injuries to keep Xie Tian here. To Xiao Chen, even if they were both injured, as long as Xie Tian did not have a chance to escape, it would be his gain. After all, as long as Xie Tian did not have a chance to escape, once the other members of the Sword Sect and Junwei arrived, Xie Tian would be dead without a doubt. Xiao Chen's idea was very simple, which was to keep Xie Tian here no matter what. Regarding this, Xie Tian did not dare exchange injuries with Xiao Chen. Like this, Xie Tian would not be able to display his full strength. With this, Xiao Chen slowly took the initiative. Being suppressed by Xiao Chen, Xie Tian's heart was depressed, but there was nothing he could do. As the fight continued, the killing intent in Xiao Chen's eyes became stronger and stronger. The sword in his hand did not stop at all, not giving Xie Tian any chance to catch his breath. Damn! Cursing in his heart, Xie Tian saw that Xiao Chen's fighting spirit was getting stronger and stronger, and his situation was getting worse and worse. As time passed, Xie Tian didn't know when the other masters of the Sword Gate would arrive. He had to think of a way to escape as soon as possible. His eyes were ice cold, and in that instant, Xie Tian made a decision in his heart. Being delayed by Xiao Chen like this, the result would definitely not be good. So, Xie Tian also made a decision. Although it was a bit painful, there was no other way. With things like this, he could only do this. With a thought, he communicated with the black token in his storage ring. This black token was given to him by those old fellows from the Dark Era. There was only one, but it could save Xie Tian's life at a critical moment. This black token, those old fellows from the Dark Era, had already said that unless they met a world master, no one could destroy it. This was what Xie Tian had always relied on. He thought that he would save this token for the most critical moment to give it to senior brother, but who would have thought that he would have to use it at the beginning? His only life-saving treasure was about to be used now. Xie Tian's heart ached, but there was no other way. Looking at Xiao Chen, the killing intent in his eyes became even stronger. Xie Tian spoke in a cold voice. Xiao Chen, don't be happy too early. This is only the beginning. Chapter 26-24. He didn't have time to waste with Xiao Chen. He didn't know when the experts of the Sword Sect would arrive. If he was surrounded by the experts of the Sword Sect, it would be even harder to escape. So, Xie Tian made his decision and used the black token, the only life-saving treasure those old fellows from the Dark Era had given him. As soon as his voice fell, the black token was directly crushed by Xie Tian. At the same time, a black light fell from the sky and covered Xie Tian's body. Seeing this, Xiao Chen naturally wasn't willing to let Xie Tian leave like this, so he immediately made his move. However, facing Xiao Chen's attack, the black light wasn't affected at all. It didn't even create a single ripple. It seemed like it was like those old fellows from the Dark Era said. Unless the World Master personally made a move, no one could break this black token. Xie Tian's heart calmed down and he looked at Xiao Chen with a dark expression as he spoke in a cold voice. Xiao Chen, don't be happy too early. The fight between the two of us has only just begun. Running away this time, Xie Tian was also considering the big picture. It didn't mean that Xie Tian didn't have the strength to fight Xiao Chen. For Xie Tian, what he really needed to do right now was to close up those 1,000 people. As soon as his voice fell, the black light slowly dissipated and Xie Tian's figure disappeared along with it. Looking at Xie Tian with killing intent, in the end, when Xie Tian's figure completely disappeared on the spot, Xiao Chen couldn't feel any aura at all. Xie Tian's method indeed made Xiao Chen unable to do anything. Their auras had completely disappeared and Xiao Chen couldn't stop it at all. Watching Xie Tian escape in front of him again, Xiao Chen was indeed a bit angry, but he couldn't do anything. Thinking about it, it was clear that this was a life-saving method those old fellows from the Dark Era gave Xie Tian. Xiao Chen naturally didn't have much confidence against those old guys from the Dark Age. After all, even Lin Yun's tone was filled with fear when she talked about the Dark Age. He had missed the best chance to kill Xie Tian. Although Xiao Chen didn't know what other tricks Xie Tian had, Xiao Chen was certain that Xie Tian wasn't as simple as he seemed on the surface. In the dark, Xie Tian must have made some preparations, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to compete with him. With just Xie Tian alone, even if he was a genuine Ancestor Realm expert, wanting to fight the entire Sword Sect by himself was an impossible and unrealistic matter. A cold glint flickered in his eyes. At the same time, Nangong Guan, Long Qing, and the others also arrived. Their speed was naturally slower than Xiao Chen's, so they were a bit slower. When everyone arrived, they found that Xie Tian's figure had already disappeared. There was no need to ask, Xie Tian must have run away. Xiao Chen didn't hide this and said with a helpless smile, "He has a life-saving treasure on him." Xie Tian indeed relied on the black token to escape. Otherwise, with Xie Tian's strength, even if he wanted to leave, he wouldn't be able to do it so easily. Xiao Chen would definitely make him pay a price. At that time, even if Xie Tian could escape, he would definitely be injured. Only, with the life-saving treasure those old fellows from the Dark Era gave him, Xiao Chen really wouldn't be able to do anything to him for now. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing comforted him. "A stray dog, he can't jump around for long." Long Qing's words were clearly meant to comfort Xiao Chen, but Xiao Chen shook his head and said with a faint smile, "The longer it drags on, the more dangerous it is. Xie Tian definitely has other preparations. I always felt that he took the initiative to appear this time to stall for time. He had always been hiding in the dark, but Xie Tian had suddenly appeared this time with such great fanfare. Xiao Chen had already suspected that this fellow wanted to stall for time. Otherwise, with Xie Tian's personality and intelligence, it was impossible for him to not know that he couldn't fight the sword sect with just his strength. It was also impossible for him to recklessly expose himself like this. So, Xiao Chen always suspected that Xie Tian had deliberately exposed himself. As for the reason, Xiao Chen didn't know for now. But no matter what the reason was, the longer it dragged on, the greater the threat Xie Tian posed. Not only Xiao Chen, even Long Qing and the others were clear on this point. But there was no other way. If they let Xie Tian escape this time, it wouldn't be easy to find him again. Moreover, the most important problem was that the things Xie Tian had prepared behind the scenes, Xiao Chen didn't have any information on when they would succeed. As soon as his voice fell, he saw everyone's faces turn serious. Xiao Chen said with a smile, "All right, we'll deal with it as it comes. Let's go back first." They didn't stop searching for Xie Tian. As long as Xie Tian didn't die, Xiao Chen and the sword sect wouldn't be at ease. But without any clues, Xiao Chen didn't know where to start, so he could only return to the sword sect first. Of course, the most important thing was to discuss with Xianyuan Ling Nangong Guan, Wu Huan, Lin Qing, and the others were still searching for Xie Tian. Xiao Chen and Long Qing returned to the sword sect with Song Xing and Zhou Song. The two of them were heavily injured and had almost died at Xie Tian's hands. They didn't have any battle strength for now, so Xiao Chen brought them back to the sword sect to rest. Once they returned to the sword sect, Xiao Chen immediately went to find Xianyuan Ling. Since the matter with Xie Tian, Xianyuan Ling had been in charge of the sword sect, taking care of all the small and large matters. With all these trivial matters, Xianyuan Ling was indeed very tired. Hearing that Xie Tian had successfully escaped, Xianyuan Ling didn't have any time to rest at all. After hearing Xiao Chen's story, Xianyuan Ling slightly knit his brows and said, "I also feel that Xie Tian definitely has some tricks he hasn't used yet, and it should be related to those missing people." Xianyuan Ling and Xiao Chen had the same thoughts, suspecting that Xie Tian still had some tricks up his sleeve. Xianyuan Ling's thoughts were even further, already suspecting that it was related to those missing martial artists. After all, these people had disappeared at the same time. Although there was no evidence that these people's disappearance was related to Xie Tian, whether it was Xianyuan Ling or Xiao Chen, they were certain that it was related to Xie Tian. Xie Tian's strange actions this time, according to the two of them, were to stall for time. Then there was an 80% chance that it was related to those missing martial artists. Hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Xiao Chen silently nodded. Then he helplessly said, "Do you think that Xie Tian is increasing the strength of these people to fight the sword sect? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." This chapter ends. Chapter 26-25. Xiao Qin guessed that Xie Tian was increasing the strength of these people, so that they could fight against the sword sect in the future. It had to be said, Xiao Qin's guess was correct, and there was no problem. Regarding this, Xianyuan Ling also agreed. Xiao Qin guessed that Xie Tian was increasing the strength of these people, so that they could fight against the sword sect in the future. It had to be said, Xiao Qin's guess was correct, and there was no problem. Regarding this, Xianyuan Ling also agreed. It should be like this, so the most important thing right now is to find the whereabouts of these people. Finding the whereabouts of Xie Tian and the 1,000 martial artists as soon as possible was the most important thing right now. Xiao Qin also agreed with this. Letting Xie Tian escape this time, not only did Xiao Qin not stop the search, he increased the intensity of the search. No matter what, they had to find Xie Tian. Even if they couldn't find him, finding the whereabouts of the 1,000 martial artists was also good news. Of course, this matter fell onto Xianyuan Ling's head in the end. Looking at Xianyuan Ling, Xiao Qin said with a smile, "Big brother, I'll have to trouble you with this matter." "Me again? Then what are you doing?" Hearing this, Xianyuan Ling said with a helpless expression. Although Xianyuan Ling didn't personally rush to the front lines during this time and didn't participate in the search, arranging these matters and analyzing the information from all over the place had already made Xianyuan Ling very busy. It wasn't exaggerated to say that Xianyuan Ling hadn't rested for several days. This kind of work was very tiring, but regarding this, Xiao Qin said in a carefree voice, "If you don't do this, who will? Big brother doesn't want me to do everything. Then again, I need to recover enough energy to deal with Xie Tian, so I'll leave this behind-the-scenes matter to Big brother. I'm assured with you doing this." Xiao Qin really understood Xianyuan Ling's role. Just talking about this matter, Xianyuan Ling's performance made Xiao Qin unable to find fault with him. Xianyuan Ling could be said to have arranged everything perfectly. Although Xie Tian had escaped in the end, this wasn't related to Xianyuan Ling at all. First, Xianyuan Ling's encirclement had indeed surrounded Xie Tian. If it wasn't for Xie Tian having a life-saving treasure from those old fellows from the Dark Era, it would have been hard for him to escape. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, Xianyuan Ling sighed helplessly. Then, he said unhappily, "Let's make it clear first. After this matter is over, you can't arrange anything else for me. I need to have a good rest. I'm exhausted." In the end, Xianyuan Ling agreed, and Xiao Qin naturally agreed to his request. If there was nothing, Xianyuan Ling could rest however he wanted, but if there was something, he couldn't blame Xiao Qin. Moreover, if the situation was really urgent, even if Xiao Qin didn't say anything, could Xianyuan Ling just stand by and watch? With the relationship between the two of them, Xianyuan Ling definitely wouldn't just stand by and watch Xiao Qin get into trouble. So, towards Xianyuan Ling's request, Xiao Qin agreed without any hesitation. Regarding this, Xianyuan Ling naturally knew what Xiao Qin was thinking, but he didn't care. The current plan was to take care of Xie Tian's matter first. After all, this matter was a large matter that could shake Xiao Qin's foundation. Thinking about it, if Xie Tian obtained the position of World Master in the Boundless World, it would be a devastating blow to Xiao Qin. After discussing this matter, Xiao Qin didn't stay for long because Xianyuan Ling was busy again. He kept analyzing the information from various places, determining where Xie Tian and the 1,000 over-cultivators could be hiding, and making the corresponding arrangements. He didn't have time to care about Xiao Qin at all, and Xiao Qin had nothing to do here. Not to mention that Xiao Qin wasn't interested in these things to begin with. If he had to analyze this information all day, it would be better to just kill him. Dog-eat-dog Xiao Qin directly slipped away, and Xianyuan Ling continued his bitter and busy life. Returning to his residence, there was no news of Xie Tian and the 1,000 over-cultivators for now. Xiao Qin couldn't run around like a headless fly, so staying in the sword sect and waiting for news from Xianyuan Ling was undoubtedly the best choice. Once there was any nervousness, Xianyuan Ling would definitely inform him as soon as possible. This was something that Xiao Chen was very clear on. The search became more and more intense, and under Xianyuan Ling's arrangements and orders, even the Saber Sect, Dan Valley, Moon Palace, and other large powers participated. It could be said that right now, the entire boundless world was searching for Xie Tian and the 1,000 over-cultivators. Under this kind of high-intensity search, it was like Xie Tian had disappeared from the face of the earth. There was no news at all, which made Xianyuan Ling's mood more and more irritated. However, Xianyuan Ling was very clear that the more it was like this, the more he had to remain calm. Once he became impatient, there would be a deviation in his judgment and it would be impossible to find Xie Tian's whereabouts at that time. He still methodically dealt with all kinds of matters. On this day, in the valley where the 1,000 over-cultivators were in closed-door cultivation, a group of Heavenly Plan Palace disciples welcomed them. These Heavenly Plan Palace disciples were also under orders to search for Xie Tian, but it was a pity that they didn't find anything. On this day they accidentally came to this valley. Originally, this valley was very ordinary and no one would pay attention to it. However, when these Heavenly Plan Palace disciples entered the valley, they immediately noticed something strange. The entire valley was filled with blood pools of different sizes, and these blood pools were almost dried up. At the same time, there was a figure sitting cross-legged in each blood pool. These people are the missing cultivators, the leader of the Heavenly Plan Palace said. Then, without thinking too much, he took out a voice transmission talisman and directly sent the news back to the Heavenly Plan Palace. They didn't expect that the 1,000 over-cultivators that so many powers were searching for would actually appear here. They had unintentionally made a great contribution. It was a pity that this contribution was only a contribution, but they didn't have the life to enjoy it. This was because when the Heavenly Plan Palace Deacon took out a voice transmission talisman to contact the Heavenly Plan Palace, the figures in the blood pools suddenly opened their eyes. Instantly, several terrifying auras soared into the sky. End Realm. The few people who woke up were all at the End Realm. Moreover, they weren't at the initial End Realm. They were at least at the small perfection End Realm. Feeling the terrifying pressure, the deacon's face sunk. He was prepared to order everyone to escape, but unfortunately, before he could say anything, a blood light flashed and directly pierced through his forehead. Killed in one strike. As the deacon fell, the fate of the remaining Heavenly Plan Palace disciples was obvious. With their strength, how could they deal with the few End Realm cultivators? It was a one-sided massacre. Not long later, the valley was filled with corpses. The Heavenly Plan Palace disciples were all killed on the spot without exception. Chapter 26-26. This group of Heavenly Policy Mansion disciples was lucky enough to find these cultivators. However, it was also because of this that they seemed to have opened the door to hell. Who would have thought that these cultivators with ordinary strength, cultivation, and talent would transform into End Realm experts in such a short period of time? An End Realm expert, even in the Heavenly Policy Mansion, was in existence that could become an elder. Due to the changes in the era, the martial path of the Great Thousand World had improved a lot, and it could even be said that it had completed a brand new transformation. The most obvious change was naturally the appearance of Ancestor Realm expert. However, even so, End Realm cultivators still couldn't be underestimated in the Great Thousand World. After all, under normal circumstances, cultivators who could reach the End Realm could be considered a big figure. Before they died, this group of Heavenly Policy Palace disciples seemed to have seen the cultivators who attacked them. Their cultivations were probably not outstanding among the 1,000 or so people here, because several of them had clearly reached the Emperor realm. What kind of method could make these cultivators with ordinary talent and no background, not to mention having a deep foundation, transform into End Realm and Emperor Realm experts. Such a terrifying increase was unbelievable. However, the only fortunate thing was that the news had been successfully sent back to Heavenly Policy Mansion. At this time, Heavenly Policy Mansion should have already reported this matter to the Sword Sect. Finally, they found the whereabouts of more than 1,000 warriors. The Heavenly Policy Mansion and the Sword's Gate reacted very quickly. They immediately sent the news to the Sword's Gate. At the same time, Xianyuan Ling, who was in the Sword's Gate, immediately informed Shao Qun. After receiving the news, Shao Qun hurried over and asked as soon as he saw Xianyuan Ling, "There's news." But it seems like we're still a step too late," Xianyuan Ling nodded and replied. They had indeed found the whereabouts of these 1,000 people, but from the current information, it seemed like they were still a bit late. Xie Tian had used some unknown method to turn these people into experts. The group of Heavenly Policy Mansion disciples that discovered these people were instantly killed. Xianyuan Ling's guess was right. Xie Tian must have obtained some method from Heavenly Policy Mansion, which was why he could raise the strength of these 1,000 people to such a level in such a short period of time. Although he didn't know if this method had any side effects, no matter what, these 1,000 people couldn't be treated lightly. It could even be said that they would become a huge problem for the Sword Sect. They were also Xie Tian's greatest reliance to fight against the Sword Sect. When he received the news, Xianyuan Ling understood why Xie Tian had purposely exposed his whereabouts. Perhaps it was to buy time for these 1,000 people. At that time, these 1,000 people should still be in closed-door cultivation. So, Xie Tian did not hesitate to use himself as bait to divert the attention of the Sword Sect. If they could find the whereabouts of these 1,000 people a bit earlier, the Sword Sect would have been able to exterminate them in the cradle. But it was a pity that they were a step too late, which made people very angry. Hearing Xianyuan Ling's words and seeing his disappointed expression, Shao Qun said with a calm smile, "There's no need to be too conflicted. There is no perfect thing in this world. Since we're a step late, then it's too late. But at least we've found their whereabouts, right?" Shao Qun was quite optimistic. It was fine if they were a step late. Anyway, there would be a battle that couldn't be avoided, so they would just deal with whatever came. Seeing Shao Qun's calm appearance, Xianyuan Ling helplessly shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "Then what do we do now? What else can we do? We'll make the first move and directly fight with Xie Tian." Hearing this, Shao Qun said with a smile. But this time, Xianyuan Ling had a different opinion. Although he had complained before, Xianyuan Ling was very clear that these size wouldn't change anything. So, from the beginning, Xianyuan Ling had been thinking of countermeasures. And now, Xianyuan Ling already had a relatively perfect plan in his mind. While Xianyuan Ling and Shao Qun were discussing how to deal with the situation in the valley after the Heavenly Policy Mansion disciples were killed, the 1,000 cultivators came out of their cultivation one after another. The methods of the Dark Age were indeed unfathomable. These 1,000 ordinary rogue cultivators seemed to have become completely different people under this method. They had undergone a qualitative change from the inside out. Their cultivation had definitely increased. At this time, among the 1,000 or so people, dozens of them had already reached the Emperor Realm, and a few of them had even reached the peak Emperor Realm. As for the rest, their cultivations were almost all in the End Realm. This kind of power was already comparable to the Sword Sect. In the entire Sword Sect, even if they took out all their trump cards, the number of masters they had would probably be around these few. No wonder Xie Tian had so much confidence in these 1,000 people. However, after coming out of seclusion, it was unknown if they were affected by something, but these 1,000 people's expressions became extremely cold. They gave people a chill just by looking at them. As these people woke up one by one, Xie Tian also appeared in the valley at an unknown time. Looking at these 1,000 people who had successfully come out of seclusion, Xie Tian couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face. This kind of team, even the evil god palace of the past didn't have this kind of team. With so many masters, this was Xie Tian's trump card against the sword sect. However, Xie Tian was very clear that all of this was given to him by the Dark Age. Since those old fellows could give him this kind of power, they would definitely have a way to take it back and return him to his original state. To put it bluntly, Xie Tian was clear in his heart that he was just a dog beside those old fellows from the Dark Age. Whoever they wanted him to bite, he, Xie Tian, would spare no effort to bite them. But even like this, Xie Tian was still immersed in this kind of power and couldn't extricate himself. With this kind of power, Xie Tian was willing to be a dog for the Dark Age, a dog that helped them control the boundless world. Not to mention that he was a dog in front of those old fellows, but in front of others, he, Xie Tian, was an unreachable existence. Adding in the fact that when these 1,000 people saw Xie Tian, they all respectfully called out to him, "Master!" This made Xie Tian's heart burn even more. His lips couldn't help revealing a smile as he softly muttered, "It's time to find a place to stay. Shao Chen, I've already said that this is only the beginning. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. This chapter ends." Chapter 26-27. Under the temptation of power, Xie Tian had completely sunk into it. To be honest, Xie Tian enjoyed this kind of strength and wasn't willing to let it go. Under the temptation of power, Xie Tian had completely sunk into it. To be honest, Xie Tian enjoyed this kind of strength and wasn't willing to let it go. Looking at the 1,000 warriors in front of him, each one of them had become extremely powerful, and this was all given to him by the Dark Era. With this group of people, Xie Tian was confident that he could contend against the Sword Sect and Shao Chen. With a confident smile on his face, Xie Tian waved his hand and everyone quickly left the valley. It was like Xie Tian had said, it was time to find a place to settle down. Now was the time to face the Sword Gate. This valley wasn't far from the Sword Sect. After Xie Tian's group left, what was strange was that the Sword Sect didn't appear. Logically speaking, after discovering the intentions of Xie Tian and the 1,000 warriors, the Sword Sect should have chosen to surround and annihilate them. But this time, the Sword Sect didn't do so. Was the Sword Sect afraid? Obviously not. The real reason was Xianyuan Ling and Shao Chen. Because Shao Chen didn't give the order, his subordinates naturally wouldn't make a move. At this moment, Shao Chen and Xianyuan Ling were sitting together. After hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Shao Chen said with some hesitation, "Wouldn't this be a little?" "Don't worry, I will arrange everything. Third brother, don't worry. We will just be a step slower. Since things are already like this, we can borrow Xie Tian's hands to solve the problem that third brother has always wanted to solve," Xianyuan Ling said with a smile. Hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Shao Chen was silent for a moment before nodding. "All right, then it's up to you." Shao Chen didn't reject Xianyuan Ling's plan. Xianyuan Ling smiled and didn't say anything else. With Shao Chen's personality, it wasn't suitable for him to deal with this matter. So, as Shao Chen's big brother, Xianyuan Ling could only personally sweep away all the obstacles. Xianyuan Ling's idea was very simple. Since the 1,000 warriors had successfully come out, Xie Tian would definitely make a move soon. Xie Tian's first target wouldn't be the Sword Sect. He should be looking for a place to stay in the boundless world. In this kind of place, the best choice was naturally the other large forces. After all, as long as they captured them, everything would be ready. Xie Tian had over 1,000 warriors under him. They wouldn't be afraid of fighting with the Sword Sect. So, Xianyuan Ling's idea was to let Xie Tian attack these forces and then, at the final moment, the Sword Sect would make a move and save them. At that time, they could officially merge these forces into the Sword Sect, including Dao Ju, Xiao Xiao, Li Chun, and the others. These people were people that Xiao Chen wanted to absorb into the Sword Sect, and they would become the cornerstones of the Sword Sect in the future. Only he didn't have a chance to show it, so it was delayed until now. Now that he finally had a chance, Xianyuan Ling naturally wouldn't miss it. Anyway, he couldn't avoid fighting Xie Tian, so it was better to think of a way to obtain some benefits. Xiao Chen agreed to Xianyuan Ling's plan, so the Sword Sect didn't immediately make a move. Xie Tian did what Xianyuan Ling thought and directly targeted the Saber Sect. The Saber Sect was one of the 10 great heaven ascending sects in the past. Although it couldn't compare to the Sword Sect now, if he took down the Saber Sect, Xie Tian would have a place to stay in the boundless world and would have a foundation. Like this, he would be able to compete with the Sword Sect. Xie Tian's thoughts were completely guessed by Xianyuan Ling, but the Sword Sect still didn't have any intentions of helping. The time wasn't right yet. Riding Brush House with the Saber Sect's strength, it was impossible for them to deal with Xie Tian's group. Not to mention the 1,000 over-cultivators, because the methods of the Dark Era could not be compared to the past. Just the Ancestor Realm expert Xie Tian was not something the Saber Sect could contend against. They headed straight for the Saber Sect. At the same time, inside the Saber Sect, Dao Ju and Dao Xiong were still talking about Xie Tian. Looking at his son, Dao Xiong said, "Who would have thought that Xie Tian would come back from the dead? Moreover, he is much stronger than before. He is also a person with great luck." Isn't that nonsense? If he didn't have great luck, how could he compete with Xiao Chen for the position of World Master? Hearing this, Dao Ju said with a smile. Dao Xiong asked curiously, "Between Xiao Chen and Xie Tian, who do you think will win?" The matter of Xie Tian and Xiao Chen competing for the position of World Master was no secret in the boundless world. Dao Xiong was naturally curious as to who would win in the end. Although Xiao Chen's performance was enough to make people gasp in surprise, Xie Tian was clearly not a simple person. He died again and again, but he came back from the dead again and again. It was as if Xie Tian could fight for a chance of survival each time. Faced with his father's question, Dao Ju curled his lips and said, "Based on the current situation, Xiao Chen has a higher chance of winning. Moreover, I also hope that the final winner will be Xiao Chen. I think father also doesn't want the position of World Master to fall into Xie Tian's hands." From the bottom of their hearts, Dao Xiong and Dao Ju definitely hoped that Xiao Chen would win. Most people in the boundless world probably thought the same. After all, in terms of prestige, Xiao Chen definitely surpassed Xie Tian. Xie Tian's reputation in the boundless world was not good. Just his identity as an evil martial artist was enough to make many people dislike him. Hearing Dao Ju's words, Dao Xiong smiled and didn't say anything. However, at this moment, a terrifying pressure suddenly appeared in the sky above the Saber Sect. This pressure was like a mountain fiercely pressing down, enveloping the entire Saber Sect. Feeling the appearance of this terrifying pressure, Dao Xiong and Dao Ju's expressions changed. They looked up at the sky at the same time. At the same time, figures appeared in the sky. Xie Tian. With a single glance, Dao Xiong saw Xie Tian in front of the crowd, as well as the thousands of martial artists beside him. Xie Tian's arrival was something that Dao Xiong never expected. He never thought that Xie Tian would actually target the Saber Sect. Dao Xiong didn't want to guess Xie Tian's intentions. In any case, he definitely didn't come with good intentions. As expected, after Xie Tian appeared, he spoke in an indifferent voice. "Dao Xiong, submit to this lord, and this lord can guarantee you a lifetime of wealth and glory." Xie Tian's first words were to make Dao Xiong submit. Hearing this, Dao Xiong's face sank. The disciples, attendants, and elders of the Saber Sect all looked as if they were facing a great enemy. It could be said that they were not prepared at all. The Saber Sect was completely unprepared for the sudden appearance of Xie Tian's group. However, Xie Tian was filled with confidence. The confidence in his words was telling Dao Xiong a fact. Either submit or die. Chapter 26-28. Actually, Xie Tian didn't have any special feelings towards Dao Zongchen's refusal to submit. It wasn't that he had to make Dao Zongchen submit to him. After witnessing the terrifying methods of those old fellows from the Dark Age, Xie Tian's vision had become much higher. To be honest, he looked down on Dao Zongchen. Actually, Xie Tian didn't have any special feelings towards Dao Zongchen's refusal to submit. It wasn't that he had to make Dao Zongchen submit to him. After witnessing the terrifying methods of those old fellows from the Dark Age, Xie Tian's vision had become much higher. To be honest, he looked down on Dao Zongchen. Dao Xiong and Dao Ju were the only two Emperor Realm Masters in the Saber sect. Looking at Xie Tian's surroundings, there were at least several dozen Emperor Realm Masters. This was the gap between the two sides. So, Dao Zongchen's refusal to submit didn't have any meaning to Xie Tian. Dao Xiong, however, had a serious expression. However, he wasn't stupid. At least Dao Zongchen wasn't a match for Xie Tian's group. So, after pondering for a moment, Dao Xiong said to Dao Ju, "Contact the Sword Sect." Right now, only the Sword Sect could fight Xie Tian. Hearing this, Dao Ju didn't hesitate and directly contacted the Sword Sect. Seeing that Dao Xiong didn't reply for a long time, Xie Tian revealed a cold smile. "Dao Xiong, this king will only give you 3 breaths of time. If you don't submit, there's no need for Dao Zongchen to exist. Damn it, activate the sect protecting array." Dao Xiong clearly had no intention of submitting and immediately ordered the activation of the sect protecting array. Although he knew that Dao Zongchen's sect protecting array wouldn't be able to stop Xie Tian's group, Dao Xiong had no other choice. Submitting to Xie Tian was definitely impossible. Right now, Dao Xiong could only hope that the Sword Sect's reinforcements would arrive as soon as possible. Seeing Dao Zongchen's sect protecting array activate, Xie Tian revealed a disdainful smile and coldly said, "Reckless." In Xie Tian's eyes, the Saber sect's so-called sect protecting array was simply a joke. If they wanted to rely on this sect protecting array to block him, that was simply a fool's dream. What a joke. As soon as he finished speaking, Xie Tian threw out a punch. A terrifying fist glow fiercely slammed into the Saber sect's sect protecting array. Instantly, the entire sect protecting array began to wildly tremble. Seeing this, Dao Xiong also cried out loudly, "Disciples of the Saber sect, listen up. Use all your strength to activate the formation." Now they could only gather the strength of the entire Saber sect. Hearing this, all the disciples, deacons, and elders of the Saber sect wildly poured their spiritual energy into the sect protecting array, hoping to block Xie Tian for a bit longer. With the support of everyone's spiritual energy, the sect protecting array quickly stabilized, but Xie Tian's expression didn't change at all. He just softly said, "A final struggle." It was indeed a final struggle. Gathering the strength of the entire Saber sect, they could indeed stall for some time, but that was all. It was impossible to stop Xie Tian at all. Xie Tian clearly didn't have any intentions of stalling for time. He directly said to the people beside him, "Let's attack together and break this laughable turtle shell." After saying this, Xie Tian took the lead to attack. At the same time, the 1,000 cultivators beside him also attacked. Instantly, all kinds of martial skills wildly exploded in the sky above the Saber sect. The Saber sect's sect protecting array was also in imminent danger. Especially the disciples of the Saber sect, they were all injured by this terrifying power. Indeed, they couldn't hold on for long. Right now Dao Xiong was also doing his best to maintain the array. The sect protecting array was Dao Xiong's only support, but based on the current situation, it wouldn't be able to last for long. "I hope we can make it in time." He could only silently pray in his heart. While the Saber sect was in imminent danger, at the same time, in the Sword sect, Xianyuan Ling naturally received a letter from the Daoju. The contents of the letter were very simple. It was a request for help. After receiving the letter, Xianyuan Ling looked at Nangong Guan in front of him. He said to Zhou Song and the others with a smile, "It seems like the saber sect situation isn't good. Is there even a need to say that? The saber sect can't stop Xie Tian." Hearing this, Nangong Guan said with a bit of displeasure. It was very clear that Nangong Guan didn't understand Xianyuan Ling's actions. In Nangong Guan's eyes, Xianyuan Ling still wanted to scheme against the saber sect and the Moon Palace at this time. He wanted to borrow Xie Tian's hand to obtain more benefit. With Nangong Guan's personality, Xianyuan Ling's actions were completely unreasonable. So she couldn't understand and naturally had some opinions about Xianyuan Ling. Xianyuan Ling naturally knew about this, but he didn't have any intention of explaining. There were some things that had to be done by someone. Moreover, for Shao Chen, he, Xianyuan Ling, was willing to take the blame. He didn't care about morality, he was ruthless, and he was extremely sinister. Xianyuan Ling didn't care about this, as long as he could clear the obstacles for Shao Chen in the future. So, after hearing Nangong Guan's words, Xianyuan Ling only revealed a faint smile. Then he asked Zhou Song to the side, "Are our people all here?" "They're all in position, we can make a move at any time." Hearing this, Zhou Song replied. His attitude was also a bit stiff. From the beginning, Xianyuan Ling had already arranged for the sword sect's experts to rush to the saber sect. However, he didn't make a move immediately and was waiting for an opportunity. Now that the opportunity was ripe, the saber sect was in imminent danger. If he made a move now to save the saber sect, Xianyuan Ling's next step could be carried out. However, Nangong Guan and Zhou Song didn't know that Xianyuan Ling's original intention was to let the saber sect be destroyed as long as he saved the Daoju. However, this was rejected by Shao Chen. This was Shao Chen's bottom line. Without any other choice, Xianyuan Ling could only take a step back and save the saber sect before continuing with the next step of the plan. Although it would be a bit troublesome, he could still achieve his goal. Nangong Guan and Zhou Song didn't know about this matter, otherwise their attitude towards Xianyuan Ling wouldn't just be cold, they would be angry. After hearing Zhou Song's reply, Xianyuan Ling only said a single sentence. "Make your move, the time has come." "You're not going to inform the sect master? If the sect master doesn't go, who will fight Xie Tian?" Nangong Guan said in a cold voice. To stop Xie Tian and save the saber sect, Shao Chen would definitely make a move. However, Xianyuan Ling only said this with a faint smile. "This matter isn't suitable for the sect master to make a move, we need the old ancestor to make a move." It wasn't suitable for Shao Chen to make a move at this time, so the best choice was Jun Wuya. Although Nangong Guan didn't know what Xianyuan Ling was planning, she only stood up and coldly said this before leaving. "Up to you, but there are some things that need to be done morally. The saber sect has been good to my sword sect, and you're also a member of the sword sect, as well as the sect master's sworn brother. I hope that you won't bring the sword sect into the abyss of eternal damnation. That's all I have to say, take care of yourself." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. This chapter ends. Chapter 26-29. As soon as she finished speaking, Nangong Guan walked away. The dissatisfaction in her voice was very clear. Nangong Guan was indeed quite dissatisfied with Xianyuan Ling's actions. However, Xianyuan Ling did not express his opinion. He only told Zhou Song to follow the plan. After that, Xianyuan Ling went to look for Shao Chen. Not letting Shao Chen appear was also Xianyuan Ling's idea. There were some things that were better left to Junwei. Moreover, the target this time was not Xie Tian, but the sword sect and the other major forces. At this time, it was not suitable for Shao Chen to appear. When Xianyuan Ling arrived at Xiao Chen's residence, Xiao Chen was already waiting for him. Jun Wuya was also sitting beside Xiao Chen. It was obvious that they had been waiting for Xianyuan Ling's arrival. Seeing Xianyuan Ling walk into the courtyard, Xiao Chen nodded slightly. Jun Wuya closed his eyes and asked, "Is it time?" Jun Wuya also knew about Xianyuan Ling's plan and did not say much. He neither agreed nor disagreed. Now that Jun Wuya had spoken, it was obvious that he was asking if it was time for him to make a move. Hearing this, Xianyuan Ling bowed and said, "Yes, you can act now. Then this old man will make a trip." Jun Wuya stood up and looked at Xianyuan Ling indifferently. Then, he floated away. After Jun Wuya left, Xiao Chen said with a bitter smile, "Big brother, it's been hard on you." Xianyuan Ling's actions were completely for his own sake. Xiao Chen was very clear about this. For this reason, Xianyuan Ling did not hesitate to bear the infamy. From Nangong Guan's attitude, it could be seen that there were many people in the sword sect who were dissatisfied with Xianyuan Ling's actions. They felt that Xianyuan Ling's actions were too immoral. In their opinion, since the sword sect was the ruler of the world, it could not do such immoral things. However, they did not think that Xianyuan Ling's purpose was to make the sword sect stronger. For this reason, Xianyuan Ling did not hesitate to bear the infamy. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Xianyuan Ling smiled and shook his head. "You know that I don't care about this." Xianyuan Ling did not care about this. He was not like Xiao Chen. He was not the sect master of the sword sect, so he did not need of prestige. To put it bluntly, Xiao Chen might be the idol of everyone in the sword sect. Therefore, Xiao Chen's image must be righteous. However, Xianyuan Ling was different. He did not need these things. In Xianyuan Ling's opinion, he was more like a knife in Xiao Chen's hand. If Xiao Chen could not handle something, or if it was inconvenient for him to do it, he, the knife, would deal with it. Xianyuan Ling's position was that he hid in the dark, and he was someone who cleared obstacles for Xiao Chen. Most of the time, his methods were not honorable. Therefore, Xianyuan Ling could only bear the infamy. Seeing Xianyuan Ling's indifferent expression, Xiao Chen smiled helplessly. Then the two brothers sat across from each other. Xiao Chen personally made a cup of tea for Xianyuan Ling and waited for the saber sect's result. With Jun Wuya making a move, there should not be any problems. Of course, even if the saber sect suffered any losses, it was not a bad thing for the sword sect. If it was not for Xiao Chen's firm opposition, Xianyuan Ling would have allowed the saber sect to be destroyed and only saved Dao Ju. It was because of Xiao Chen's opposition that Xianyuan Ling changed his previous plan and chose to make a move ahead of time. The situation on the saber sect's side was becoming more and more dangerous. The sect protecting array was on the verge of shattering. Many saber sect disciples, because they kept pouring their spiritual energy into the array, suffered a backlash along with the attacks of Xie Tian and the others, and died on the spot. Every time Xie Tian and the others attacked, there would be saber sect disciples who would die from the backlash. Although Dao Xiong saw this, there was nothing he could do. "Are the people from the sword sect not here yet?" His eyes were filled with a cold light as he asked Dao Ju to the side. Since things had reached this point, Dao Xiong naturally felt that something was wrong. The sword sect's reaction was too abnormal. How could there be no movement after such a long time? Hearing this, Dao Ju helplessly said, "They've already replied. They said to hold on for a bit longer." Hearing Dao Ju's reply, Dao Xiong did not say anything else. He could only hold on for now. However, in this situation, how long could they hold on? There were so many disciples in the saber sect, and almost half of them had died. Moreover, this was under the protection of the sect protecting array. If there was no sect protecting array, the consequences would be hard to imagine. It was only a matter of time before the sect protecting array was broken. As more and more saber sect disciples died, the sect protecting array would be unable to hold on. At the same time, Xie Tian in the sky looked at the sect protecting array that was already covered in cracks and revealed a cold smile. Dao Xiong, everything is over. Stubbornly resisting is useless. After saying this, Xie Tian sent out a punch. The fist glow slammed into the array and with a crisp sound, the sect protecting array shattered. Seeing the array shatter, a look of despair flashed in Dao Xiong's eyes. Was everything going to end like this? Without the protection of the sect protecting array, what could the Saber sect use to resist Xie Tian and the others? Xie Tian did not even need to take action. Just the dozens of Emperor Realm cultivators by his side were enough to destroy the Saber sect. It was not only Dao Xiong who felt despair in his heart. Everyone in the Saber sect who was still alive was the same. They looked at Xie Tian in the sky with terrified expressions. Without the obstruction of the array, the smile on Xie Tian's face became even brighter. In his eyes, the Saber sect was already easy to capture. However, at this moment, the numerous experts of the Sword sect finally arrived. Jun Wuya also appeared in front of Xie Tian in a timely manner. The sudden appearance of the Sword sect's experts had undoubtedly ignited the hope in the hearts of the Saber sect members. However, Dao Xiong looked at Jun Wuya and the others in the sky, and a complicated expression flashed in his eyes. This day has still come in the end. Dao Xiong seemed to have realized something, which was why he said these words. On the other side, Xie Tian was also stunned when he saw Jun Wuya appear. He then smiled and said, "Jun Wuya, it's really been a long time." "It has been a long time, but I don't want to see you." Hearing this, Jun Wuya indifferently replied. After speaking, Jun Wuya paused for a moment before continuing. "Enough nonsense, let's fight." After speaking, Jun Wuya did not give Xie Tian a chance to reply and directly chose to attack. Xie Tian was naturally not to be outdone and immediately counterattacked. Naturally, he could tell that Jun Wuya had already broken through to the Ancestor realm. His combat strength and cultivation could not be mentioned in the same breath, so he could not be careless in the slightest. The two Ancestor realm experts fought fiercely in the sky above the Saber sect. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. This chapter ends. Chapter 26:30. In the fierce battle between the two Ancestor realm experts, it was clear that Jun Wuya's combat strength was inferior to Xie Tian's. After all, Jun Wuya did not have the talent and luck of Shaoqun, and he did not have the help of those old fellows in the origin world. Therefore, Jun Wuya's combat strength could only be considered the most ordinary in the Ancestor realm. However, Shaoqun and Xie Tian were not like this. Because of their different reasons, their combat strength was at the peak of the same realm. After exchanging several hundred moves, Jun Wuya fell into a disadvantage as expected. Xie Tian also seized this opportunity to suppress Jun Wuya. Moreover, there was a cold smile on his face as he said, "Jun Wuya, you are not this lord's match." "So what? Do you dare to fight me?" Hearing this, Jun Wuya replied indifferently. These words were indeed to the point. Was Xie Tian stronger than Jun Wuya? This was certain, but did he dare to fight Jun Wuya? The answer was certain, so naturally he did not dare. Xie Tian was confident in taking down Jun Wuya in a one-on-one battle, but what about Shaoqun? Although Shaoqun had not appeared yet, could you guarantee that Shaoqun would not make a move? Have you ever seen a wild beast that could guarantee that it would not bite? Therefore, when he heard Jun Wuya's words, Xie Tian's face sunk and he did not speak. Although Xie Tian had already guessed why Shaoqun did not personally make a move. In the Sword sect, Shaoqun had said that he had reached a critical moment in his closed-door cultivation and could not come out for the time being, so Jun Wuya was making a move. But would Xie Tian believe these words? He had already realized that he was being used. Shaoqun wanted to kill with a borrowed knife, and he, Xie Tian, was that knife. However, Xie Tian could not do anything about this, and could only helplessly act as the knife in Shaoqun's hand. However, this blade of his was not completely infallible. Once Xiao Chen changed his mind and made a move, Xie Tian would be caught off guard and would be in great danger. So, Jun Wuya had nothing to fear and Xie Tian had no other choice. Others say that your sword sect is open and honest, but in my eyes it's only this. You've been forced into a corner with different methods. With a cold snort, Xie Tian cursed. Regarding this, Jun Wuya did not reply and continued to fight with Xie Tian. Below, Dao Xiong and the others arranged for people to treat the injured Saber sect disciples while watching the fierce battle in the sky. Actually, Dao Xiong no longer cared about the outcome of this battle because it was impossible for the sword sect to lose. What Dao Xiong was most concerned about now was the sword sect's future. Also, what about the other Ling Tian sects besides the sword sect? The sword sect would definitely not let them off. What would come sooner or later, and the sword sect's blade had finally come down on them. In fact, the era of the 10 great Ling Tian sects had long passed. It was just that some of the old and stubborn ones refused to accept this fact. The reason why the Swords Gate had never really taken action was probably because they did not want to be implicated too much. And now, the time was right and Xie Tian was the best person to wield the blade, so the sword sect used Xie Tian. With this slash, it meant that the era of the 10 Ling Tian sects had come to an end. The current battle in Dao Xiong's eyes was just a formality and there wouldn't be any real results. Just wait and see. Not long after, Xie Tian would definitely take the initiative to retreat. Dao Xiong already had an answer in his heart. Inside the sword sect, Xiao Chen and Xianyuan Ling were still sitting across from each other. They were leisurely drinking tea while chatting. Master should have already started fighting with Xie Tian, right? After drinking a mouthful of tea, Xiao Chen asked in a soft voice. 29 Gigi. Hearing this, Xianyuan Ling said with a faint smile, "It should be. What if Xie Tian doesn't retreat?" Hearing this, Xiao Chen continued to ask. He knew that Jun Wuya was not as strong as Xie Tian. Xiao Chen was certain of this because Xiao Chen's current strength was about the same as Xie Tian's. Using his own strength to compare with Jun Wuya's strength, he would naturally be able to get the result. Xiao Chen was a little worried about Jun Wuya. Regarding this, Xianyuan Ling said confidently, "He won't. If he doesn't retreat, then it's the same to take care of him first." Xie Tian was not a fool. It was impossible for him not to retreat. Even if he didn't retreat, they would just kill him. Although killing Xie Tian would mean that the blade would be gone, without the threat of Xie Tian, Xianyuan Ling had many other methods to completely end the 10 Ling Tian sects. To put it bluntly, compared to Xie Tian, the Ling Tian sects like the Blade sect were easier to deal with. Xianyuan Ling had 100 methods to achieve his goal. Hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Xiao Chen nodded. Thinking about it, it was impossible for Xie Tian not to retreat. Both of them were very confident. As for the Blade sect's side, it was as planned. After a fierce battle, Xie Tian finally chose to retreat. In the end, Xie Tian had already taken the advantage. If they continued fighting, the final victor would definitely be Xie Tian. However, Xie Tian still chose to retreat. It was exactly like what they said. Would Xie Tian dare to fight with Jun Wuya? Xie Tian retreated, but Jun Wuya did not have a happy expression on his face. This was because this kind of victory was within his expectations. Secondly, to be more accurate, this was not a victory at all. Seeing Xie Tian escape with his people, Jun Wuya did not give the order to chase after them. Instead, he allowed Xie Tian's group to leave. When Xie Tian's group disappeared, Jun Wuya slowly descended and arrived in front of Dao Xiong. The two of them could be considered old friends. They had known each other since they were young. Seeing Jun Wuya, who was now the ancestor of the sword sect and an ancestor realm expert, Dao Xiong sighed. Not long ago, he and Jun Wuya were giants on equal footing. But now, facing Jun Wuya, Dao Xiong could only sigh. He could no longer be compared to him. Seeing Dao Xiong's complicated expression, Jun Wuya did not say anything because he did not know what to say. This time, the sword sect had indeed schemed against the blade sect. Otherwise, the blade sect would not have suffered such a large loss. The two of them looked at each other for a long time. In the end, it was Dao Xiong who broke the silence first. "Let's go." As he spoke, he took the lead and walked forward. The two of them slowly walked along the path inside the blade sect. They did not speak along the way. After a while, Dao Xiong finally spoke. "Actually, I've already guessed that this day would come. Since the day the sword sect rose, I knew that the 10 great Ling Tian sects would become history." There was not much hatred in Dao Xiong's words. He knew very well why the sword sect did this. Since an overlord had already appeared, could it be that they could still keep the other overlords from the old era? Hearing this, Jun Wuya glanced at him indifferently and said, "It's inevitable to allow others to sleep soundly beside one's bed. I hope you can understand." Chapter 26:31. Jun Wuya said calmly. Although Jun Wuya did not want to do this, he did not blame Xianyuan Ling like Nangong Guan did, because from the perspective of the sword sect and Shaoqin, Xianyuan Ling was not wrong. His starting point was for the sake of the sword sect and Shaoqin. The sword sect would not allow any threats, this was inevitable. In the current great wide world, other than Xietian, only the Lingtian sects like the Saber sect could threaten the sword sect. This threat was not because the Saber sect and the other sects were strong, but because of their influence and rallying power, as well as the changes in the era. To be honest, even if the Lingtian sects like the Saber sect and the other Lingtian sects worked together, they would not be a match for the sword sect. However, they were an old force in the great wide world and were once one of the top 10 Lingtian sect. Their influence could not be ignored. Moreover, the sword sect could be said to be on the same level as the Saber sect and the other Lingtian sect. There was even a period of time when they were not as strong as the Saber sect and the other Lingtian sects. In this way, what was the Saber sect's existence to the sword sect? Was it a kind of humiliation? Was it a kind of testimony to the decline of the sword sect? Therefore, no matter how one looked at it, after the sword sect became the only overlord of the great wide world, the Saber sect and the other Lingtian sects could not continue to exist. There was no reason for them to continue to exist. This was like the change of a dynasty. With the emergence of a new dynasty, would the emperor and members of the royal family of the old dynasty be left behind? Obviously, it was impossible. In the eyes of the sword sect, the top 10 Lingtian sects were the kings of the old era. Now that the new era had arrived, the kings of the old era could only retire. How could they stand on the same stage as the new kings? If one were to talk about whether Dao Xiong was angry or resentful, there would definitely be some. However, if one were to talk about hatred, to be honest, Dao Xiong did not have much hatred. If one were to think about it from another perspective, if the Saber sect was the one in power now, the sword sect would end up in the same way. Dao Xiong might even be more decisive. Compared to a bloody massacre, the sword sect's method was gentle enough. Moreover, the sword sect did not destroy the Saber sect. Although they had schemed, they had acted in time to save the sword sect. And the sword sect. They arrived at the side of a spirit lake and sat down. Dao Xiong looked at Jun Wuya and said with a light smile, "Then, how does your precious disciple intend to deal with the Saber sect and me?" To the sword sect, Dao Xiong's identity was the most awkward. Jun Wuya looked deeply at Dao Xiong and said slowly, "The Saber sect is disbanded. Those who are willing to join the sword sect can be taken over by the sword sect. Those who are unwilling will be dismissed on the spot. As for you, you have two choices. One is to live a carefree life and ignore the affairs of the world. The second is to join the sword sect and become an ancestor of the sword sect like me. You don't have to care about anything on normal days. You only have to protect the sword sect when you're needed. Dao Xiong smiled when he heard Jun Wuya's words. This was already considered an extra kindness from Shao Qun and Jun Wuya. After all, with his identity, the best way to solve this problem was naturally to end it once and for all. It would save him a lot of trouble if he killed them directly. However, the sword sect gave him two choices. Moreover, no matter which choice he chose, it was not a bad outcome for Dao Xiong. In fact, the second choice was to join the sword sect and become an ancestor. His status was almost the same as Jun Wuya's. At least on the surface, it was enough to give him status and face. Dao Xiong could naturally guess that the reason for this was probably because Jun Wuya and Shao Qun remembered their old friendship. In fact, this was indeed the case. If they followed Xianyuan Ling's wishes, Dao Xiong and the others would definitely be killed. After all, dead people were the safest. However, Shao Qun strongly opposed it. Xianyuan Ling wanted to abolish the former Lingtian sect. Shao Qun could accept this and had no objections. However, Shao Qun was not willing to kill Dao Xiong and the others. Of course, Jun Wuya was not willing to do so either. This was especially true for Dao Xiong, Luo Xing, and Dan Qingyang, who had always been on good terms with the sword sect. Xian Shuba. The resentment in his heart dissipated a little. When he saw the smile on Dao Xiong's face, although it looked bitter, it at least showed that the resentment in his heart was gradually dissipating. Jun Wuya continued. From a personal standpoint, I hope that you can join the sword sect. That way, you will have a chance to break through to the progenitor realm. Besides, moreover, the sword gate will be more at ease. After all, it's right under their noses, right? Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Dao Xiong interrupted him before he could finish. The sword sect naturally hoped that Dao Xiong would choose the second path. After all, compared to becoming a rogue cultivator, becoming a patriarch of the sword sect would make Shao Qun feel more at ease. To put it bluntly, it meant that he would be placed under house arrest and monitored. Jun Wuya did not refute Dao Xiong's words. He calmly waited for Dao Xiong to continue. Seeing Jun Wuya's reaction, Dao Xiong knew that he was right. He stood up, turned his head to look at the grass and trees around him, and softly muttered to himself. I founded the sword sect single-handedly. I've lived here for so many years. I watched it grow step by step, watched it grow stronger, and now it's declining step by step. To be honest, it's like I'm looking at my own child. I'm filled with reluctance. He was reluctant because the sword sect was his life's work. However, it was destroyed just like that without any ability to resist. Everything before him, including the grass and trees, was so intimate to Dao Xiong. However, from today onwards, the sword sect would no longer exist in the Great Thousand World. Hearing Dao Xiong sigh, Jun Wuya did not say anything. He only listened quietly. After saying a lot, he revealed all the reluctance in his heart. In the end, Dao Xiong looked at Jun Wuya and said, "All right, I'll go back to the sword sect. All right, I'll follow you back to the sword gate. However, if these disciples of the saber sect are unwilling, I hope that the sword gate will be lenient." Of course. Hearing this, Jun Wuya happily nodded and agreed. In the end, Dao Xiong chose the second path, which was to join the sword sect and become a patriarch in name only. He had the title of a patriarch, but he did not have any real power. In other words, he was just like a mascot. On the way back, perhaps because he had thought things through, or perhaps because he had completely given up, Dao Xiong gave off a much more carefree feeling. Even his cultivation had loosened. Sensing this, Dao Xiong was stunned. Jun Wuya smiled bitterly and said, "Is this the end of the bitterness for you? Haha, it's not really the end of the bitterness. Cultivation is the cultivation of the heart. In the past, I had too many worries. Now that I've let go, I'll naturally have some comprehension. Just like you've been idle your entire life. That's why your cultivation is always ahead of mine." Chapter 2632. His cultivation base, which had remained stagnant for many years without showing any signs of nervousness, actually showed some signs of loosening at this moment. Although it was only a little, it was enough to make an expert at Dao Xiong's level excited. After all, every little bit of improvement was extremely difficult. His cultivation base, which had remained stagnant for many years without showing any signs of nervousness, actually showed some signs of loosening at this moment. Although it was only a little, it was enough to make an expert at Dao Xiong's level excited. After all, every little bit of improvement was extremely difficult. However, Dao Xiong was not in such a good mood right now. Instead, he was somewhat self-deprecating. Indeed, it was undeniable that letting go of some things in one's heart was indeed helpful for the improvement of one's cultivation base. In response, Junwuya only smiled and said nothing. Dao Xiong had no choice but to follow the sword sect's instructions and deal with the saber sect's matter. Junwuya remained in the saber sect for the time being to assist with the saber sect's matters. That day, Dao Xiong had already informed the higher-ups of the saber sect of the matter. Of course, Dao Xiong did not say that the sword sect had forced them to do so. Instead, he put all the blame on himself and analyzed many things for everyone. Everyone, this old man has decided to disband the saber sect. Times have changed, and it is no longer the same as it was back then. This old man also intends to let the saber sect's disciples join the sword sect. Of course, this old man will also become the patriarch of the sword sect. After hearing Dao Xiong's words, the upper echelons of the saber sect were naturally no fools. At the very least, they were able to guess what exactly had happened. However, no one pointed it out. Just as Dao Xiong had said, the current era was no longer the same as before. The disappearance of the saber sect was inevitable from the very beginning. With Junwuya personally overseeing the situation, nothing would happen. The higher-ups of the saber sect did not dare to do anything out of line. On the other side, after the dust had settled on the saber sect, Xianyuan Ling also sent people to the Dan Valley, Moon Palace, and other Lingtian sects. The saber sect was just a breakthrough. Next, Xianyuan Ling would have to face people from other Lingtian sects. Inviting them to the sword sect was to put an end to the old era. The experts of the sword sect came knocking on the door one after another. The Moon Palace's experts were fine, as they had also guessed the intentions of the sword sect. Luo Xing and Xiao Xiao were not too opposed to this. After meeting with the sword sect's emissary, Luo Xing looked at Xiao Xiao, who stood before her, and said softly, "It seems the sword sect has taken action. Boundless should be in the saber sect right now." Yes, according to the news, the saber sect has already decided to disband. Many of the saber sect's experts have chosen to join the sword sect. Hearing this, Xiao Xiao replied with a calm expression. Luo Xing wasn't against joining the Sword's Gate. In fact, she was looking forward to it because she would be able to spend time with Junwuya in the future. Liking Junwuya for a lifetime had always been Luo Xing's dream. Therefore, without much hesitation, Luo Xing had already made her choice. It was impossible. In addition, Luo Xing was also interested in joining the sword sect. Naturally, the Moon Palace would follow suit. However, everything would have to wait until they joined the sword sect. However, the other factions, such as Dan Valley and the Heavenly Policy Palace, were somewhat hesitant. These two factions had also received news from the Saber sect. They knew the current situation of the Saber sect and the attitude of the Sword sect. To be honest, they were somewhat opposed to disbanding or joining the Sword sect. However, there was nothing they could do. In Dan Valley, Dan Qingyang looked at the distant sky and sighed faintly. 77 ebook, what will come will come. This day can't be avoided. Dan Xian stood quietly behind Dan Qingyang. As soon as he finished speaking, Dan Qingyang turned to look at Dan Xian and asked, Dan Xian, do you hate the sword sect? Logically speaking, the Sword Sect wanted to annex the Dan Valley. To put it bluntly, they wanted to destroy the Dan Valley. Dan Xian and Dan Qingyang should hate the Sword Sect. However, after hearing Dan Qingyang's words, Dan Xian replied with a calm expression. Like I said before, what will come will come. We can't avoid it. This is inevitable, isn't it? We've been prepared for it. Since they had already guessed that such a day would come, there was nothing they couldn't let go of now. Times had changed. The disappearance of the Dan Valley was a decision of history. Just like in the long river of time in the great wide world, many factions like the Dan Valley had been destroyed and drowned in the long river of time. Now it was just the Dan Valley's turn. Hearing Dan Xian's words, Dan Qingyang didn't say anything else. He knew that the Sword Sect's messenger this time was inviting Dan Qingyang and the others to the Sword Sect to discuss the matter of Xietian, but in reality, they were talking about the various large powers merging into the Sword Sect. As for the reason, Dan Qingyang had already guessed it. It was because they were facing a great enemy, and in order to deal with Xietian, everyone should work together. In order to better command, the suggestion was for the Dan Valley, the Heavenly Plan Palace, the Moon Palace, and the other large powers to temporarily merge into the Sword Sect. As for the disciples under them, they would temporarily be treated as disciples of the Sword Sect. Only, the word temporarily was a lie. Chapter 26:33. That night, Xietian left alone and no one knew where he went. In the Sword Sect, Xianyuan Ling, who had just left Xiao Chen's place, returned to his cave residence and was served a cup of tea by a maid. Xianyuan Ling had his hands behind his back as he looked at the bright moon in the sky. That night, Xietian left alone and no one knew where he went. In the Sword Sect, Xianyuan Ling, who had just left Xiao Chen's place, returned to his cave residence and was served a cup of tea by a maid. Xianyuan Ling had his hands behind his back as he looked at the bright moon in the sky. It should be about time. Xianyuan Ling's words were very strange. On the other side, the Heavenly Policy Palace was also hesitating because of the Saber Sect's matter, and Li Xiao was in a dilemma. Speaking of Li Xiao and Jun Wuya, Luo Xing's relationship was very complicated. Li Xiao and Jun Wuya were rivals in love. Li Xiao had always liked Luo Xing, but Luo Xing liked Jun Wuya. Although Li Xiao gradually let go of his feelings and even had a good relationship with Jun Wuya, Li Xiao was still a little conflicted if the Heavenly Policy Palace was to merge with the Sword Sect. Wouldn't that mean that he was under Jun Wuya? Merging with his rival in love was something that no man would be willing to accept. Although it had happened many years ago, there were some things that couldn't be forgotten just because one wanted to. Sitting alone in his cave residence, Li Xiao was very hesitant. Moreover, the people from the Sword Sect had already made it very clear that in a few days, all the great Emperor Realm Masters would gather in the Sword Sect. At that time, he would have to give an answer. If he refused, the Sword Sect wouldn't be so easy to talk to and would definitely take action. With the current strength of the Sword Sect, it wouldn't be too difficult for them to deal with the Heavenly Policy Palace. Li Xiao had a feeling that Jun Wuya was better than him. Thinking back to the past, Li Xiao tragically realized that from the beginning, he had been suppressed by Jun Wuya in every aspect. Whether it was in terms of cultivation talent, cultivation realm, or even women, Jun Wuya had always firmly suppressed him. As for Li Xiao, it was as if he had been living under Jun Wuya's shadow. Once, for the sake of Luo Xing, Li Xiao had challenged Jun Wuya, but he had lost miserably. At the same time, he had also tried to move Luo Xing with his true feelings, but he had also lost miserably. As for Jun Wuya, he didn't do anything and he had already made Luo Xing fall head over heels for him. Moreover, after so many years, Luo Xing's feelings for Jun Wuya hadn't changed at all. They were still as strong as before. Compared to Jun Wuya, Li Xiao felt that he was nothing. Giving a sigh, Li Li Xiao was currently at a loss and didn't know what choice he should make. But at this moment, Li Xiao's face that had been filled with disappointment suddenly sunk. With such a fast speed, Li Xiao's eyes wildly jumped, but he didn't have any chance to react at all. Xie Tian's attack had already arrived, heading straight for Li Xiao's heart. At this critical moment, Li Xiao used all his strength to block it and avoided his vitals. In the end, Xie Tian's finger missed by a bit and couldn't pierce through Li Xiao's heart. Not being able to kill him with a single attack, Xie Tian said with a cold smile. Not bad, but how many moves can you last? Worthy of being a famous person, Li Xiao's combat awareness was indeed top class. But so what? It still couldn't change anything. Between the two of them, there was a gap that couldn't be crossed. If Xie Tian wanted to kill Li Xiao, it was a very simple matter, it was only a matter of time. After his attack failed, Xie Tian didn't hesitate and attacked Li Xiao again. But this time, Li Xiao wasn't so lucky and was heavily injured. Following this, although Li Xiao continued to fight to the death, in the end, the gap between the two of them was too big. Even if Li Xiao used all his strength, he still couldn't change anything. After 100 moves, Xie Tian's attack shattered Li Xiao's heart. An Emperor Realm Master, Heavenly Policy Mansion's old ancestor, died in his cave mansion just like that. His gaze began to slacken, and his body fell backwards stiffly. It was as if he had died and his Tao had vanished. Chapter 26:34. Although Li Xiao had used everything he had and fought with all his strength, he had still died at Xie Tian's hands in the end. There was indeed a gap between the Emperor Realm and the Ancestor Realm that was difficult to cross. This kind of gap was not something that could be made up for by going all out. After killing Li Xiao, the smile on Xie Tian's face became even brighter. Next to Li Xiao's corpse, Xie Tian left a line of words. Those who obey will live, those who defy will die. It was just a few simple words, but if anyone saw these words, they would immediately think of the Sword Sect. After all, the actions of the Sword Sect during this time had been seen by everyone. It was clear that the Sword Sect wanted to cleanse the entire boundless world and eliminate all those who posed a threat to them. Li Xiao was killed in such a sensitive period of time. Furthermore, there were 6 threatening words beside his corpse. Anyone would suspect Sword's Gate of being the culprit behind this. This was also Xie Tian's goal this time. He had been forced to become a blade in the hands of the Sword Sect, but Xie Tian was not willing to become a blade in the hands of others, so he had framed the Sword Sect. Moreover, Xie Tian had chosen Li Xiao as his target. It could be said that Li Xiao was the one who was most unwilling to join the Sword Sect because of his relationship with Jun Wuya and Luo Xing. Li Xiao could not be as calm as the others. Because of this, the world would believe that this was the doing of the Sword Sect. Because Li Xiao did not agree to joining the Sword Sect, the Sword Sect had made a move to kill him. First, it was to get rid of this hidden danger, and second, it was to warn others and let them make a choice. Xie Tian's idea was not bad. Once he thought of Li Xiao's corpse being found, the Sword Sect's reputation would suffer a large blow. Xie Tian couldn't help secretly feeling excited. He knew that just this matter alone was not enough to hurt the Sword Sect, but as long as it gave the Sword Sect a headache, Xie Tian was already very satisfied. Moreover, in the face of danger, the other faction's attitudes towards the Sword Sect would probably change slightly. Don't forget, even a rabbit would bite when cornered, and a cornered dog would jump over a wall. In a situation where there was no way to retreat, in order to protect themselves, the major forces would probably really take the risk. Adding in the fact that Xie Tian was adding fuel to the fire from behind, Xie Tian would definitely make a move after this, making the situation even harder to control. At that time, he would be able to stir up the large world, and he, Xie Tian, would be able to fish in troubled waters. His mood was very good. Looking at Li Xiao's corpse, Xie Tian said with a faint smile, "Li Xiao, being able to do something for this one before dying is your blessing. You can go in peace." As for killing Li Xiao, Xie Tian didn't feel anything at all. It was as simple as squashing an ant. As soon as his voice fell, Xie Tian disappeared on the spot and the restrictions around him quickly disappeared. It was like he had never been here, other than Li Xiao's corpse lying on the ground. The surroundings fell into a deathly silence as darkness covered everything. As for Li Xiao's corpse, it was silently lying on the ground without a trace of life. A silent night. That night, no one noticed anything strange with Li Xiao. Until noon of the next day, Li Chun hadn't seen Li Xiao for a long time. Feeling strange, he finally came to Li Xiao's residence. But once he came in, Li Chun saw Li Xiao's corpse and he was stunned on the spot. When he came back to his senses, Li Chun quickly ran over to Li Xiao's side, but it was a pity that Li Xiao was already cold. His eyes were red as he picked up Li Xiao's corpse. Li Chun couldn't help crying out in pain. After that, Li Chun also saw the 6 words beside Li Xiao's corpse. "Those who obey will live, those who defy will die." Seeing these 6 large words, Li Chun's eyes were filled with a strong hatred. It was like Xie Tian had thought. Faced with these 6 words, Li Chun's first suspicion was the sword sect. Moreover, being able to silently kill Li Xiao, perhaps only the sword sect could do this. Not long after, the high-level members of the Heavenly Plan Palace heard the news and came to Li Xiao's cave. Seeing Li Xiao's corpse, the high-level members of the Heavenly Plan Palace were filled with pain, and there were even some who were angrily cursing. Going too far, the sword sect is going too far. Could it be that they really think they can cover the sky with one hand? The palace master only hesitated for a bit and the sword sect actually made such a vicious move. What is the meaning of this? Killing a chicken to warn the monkeys? Using our Heavenly Plan Palace to warn the other powers? We must get an explanation from the sword sect. That's right, we must get an explanation for the palace master. No matter how strong the sword sect is, they can't act so overbearingly. The high-level members of the Heavenly Plan Palace were filled with rage over Li Xiao's death. Although the Heavenly Plan Palace wasn't as strong as the sword sect, if they didn't even dare to fart when their own ancestor was killed, how could the Heavenly Plan Palace face themselves in the future? Moreover, in everyone's eyes, the sword sect's actions this time were indeed going too far. Those who obey will live, those who defy will die. What did this mean? Could it be that as long as someone dared to go against the wishes of the sword sect, they would be killed? The high-level members were filled with righteous indignation, and Li Chun didn't say a word from beginning to end. However, the hatred in his eyes conveyed his current feelings. The Heavenly Plan Palace was furious that Li Xiao was killed. Such a big matter naturally couldn't be hidden, and the Heavenly Plan Palace clearly didn't have any intention of hiding it. If they wanted to get justice, it was impossible for them to do it alone. Therefore, many of the high-level members of the Heavenly Plan Palace began to secretly contact the Moon Palace, Dan Valley and other forces. They wanted to get an explanation from the sword sect together. Li Xiao's death was suspected to be caused by the sword sect. When the news spread, it naturally shocked everyone. All the major forces fell into a state of shock. Among them, there were some who were doubtful, some who were suspicious and some who felt that the sword sect had gone too far. Many forces received the news and the sword sect naturally received the news as well. Within the sword sect, Xianyuan Ling was the first person to receive the news from his residence. Looking at the elder in front of him, Xianyuan Ling's expression was calm and he didn't seem surprised at all. It was as if he already knew this would happen. After the elder finished speaking, Xianyuan Ling waved his hand and said, "I understand. You may leave." Hearing this, although the elder found it strange that Xianyuan Ling didn't have any reaction after hearing this, he still respectfully bowed and left the room. When the elder left and only Xianyuan Ling was left in the room, Xianyuan Ling softly muttered. As expected, they still used Li Xiao as an example? Xie Tian, you're not willing to be a knife in my hand, but you've solved a large problem for me. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. He clearly had a chance to save Li Xiao, but Xianyuan Ling did not do it. He wanted to borrow Xie Tian's hand to get rid of the obstacle that was Li Xiao. Faced with Xiao Chen's question, Xianyuan Ling did not reply or refute it. There were some things that he knew in his heart, and it was best not to involve Xiao Chen in this matter. The two brothers looked at each other. Looking at Xianyuan Ling's eyes, Xiao Chen already knew everything. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Chen stood up and looked at Xianyuan Ling with a complicated gaze as he said, "It's been hard on you, big brother." Along the way, Xiao Chen was no longer the simple youth from before. A power, a sect, they had a bright side and naturally had a dark side. Many times, if a sect wanted to develop, they had to use an unscrupulous method. But Xianyuan Ling had taken all of this for himself. For the development of the sword sect, Xianyuan Ling's methods could not be considered glorious, but to a large extent, he had cleared all obstacles for the sword sect. He did not have any intention of blaming Xianyuan Ling. Xianyuan Ling had done everything for himself, so how could Xiao Chen blame him? He had given all the good things to himself, and Xianyuan Ling had taken all the blame for himself. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Xianyuan Ling revealed a faint smile and his heart was filled with warmth. There was no need for words between the two brothers, but they could quickly understand each other's thoughts. Leaving the rest of the matters to Xianyuan Ling, Xiao Chen left Xianyuan Ling's residence. When Xiao Chen returned to his cave, he saw Nangong Guan waiting for him in the distance. Seeing Xiao Chen, Nangong Guan took the initiative to speak with an angry face. "Sect Master, I have something to discuss with you." Nangong Guan's expression was very unsightly. She no longer called Xiao Chen Junior Brother, but directly called him Sect Master. With a single glance, Xiao Chen could see that Nangong Guan was different and abnormal, as well as the anger in her eyes. Xiao Chen nodded calmly, then the two of them entered the cave together. In the courtyard, Xiao Chen had Nangong Guan sit down and personally made her a cup of tea. Nangong Guan angrily said, Sect Master, don't you think Xianyuan Ling has gone too far?" "Sect Master, isn't Xianyuan Ling going overboard? My sword gate prides itself on being a righteous sect. However, the things we have done recently are even worse than the evil cultivators. First it was the Saber sect, and this time it's even worse. He actually killed Li Xiao. How will the world view our sword sect now?" Nangong Guan had indeed come because of Li Xiao, and after listening to her, it seemed that she had already determined that Xianyuan Ling was behind this. Indeed, the biggest suspect right now was the sword sect, and within the sword sect, Xianyuan Ling was the biggest suspect. Chapter 2636. This was because Xianyuan Ling had been planning this the entire time, and Li Xiao had died at this critical moment, so Nangong Guan couldn't be blamed for suspecting him. This was because Xianyuan Ling had been planning this the entire time, and Li Xiao had died at this critical moment, so Nangong Guan couldn't be blamed for suspecting him. To put it bluntly, because of the recent matters, Nangong Guan already had feelings for Xianyuan Ling, so it was very easy for her to form a preconceived notion. But hearing Xiao Chen's words, Nangong Guan quickly found something strange. She also knew that there was a high chance that the one who did this was Xie Tian. Actually, this was a very normal matter. From the beginning, the matter of Li Xiao's death was easily explained by the sword sect. Xie Tian himself also understood this, so he never thought that just based on this simple matter, it would cause chaos in the sword sect. To put it bluntly, as long as the sword sect opened their mouth to explain, everything would be revealed. After all, this wasn't considered a high-level method of framing others. But there was one thing that couldn't be changed. It was that the Sword Sect did have thoughts about the other large powers, but even like this, once a gap was formed in their hearts, it couldn't be resolved just by explaining. The explanation was clear, but there would be a knot left in their hearts, and this knot was Xie Tian's goal. Even if everyone knew that Li Xiao was killed by him, so what? There was already a gap between the various powers and the Sword Sect, which gave Xie Tian a chance. In the future, Xie Tian would be able to expand this gap, causing the situation of the boundless world to fall into chaos. Nangong Guan didn't think of this, but it was impossible for Xianyuan Ling to not realize this. Actually, Xianyuan Ling had already realized this problem. Once this matter came out, even if it was explained, there would be a gap created. If he wanted to eliminate this gap, it wouldn't be that easy. But Xianyuan Ling didn't say anything about this and didn't even mention this matter to Xiaochun. This was because in Xianyuan Ling's heart, there was an even bigger plan. There was one thing that Jun Weiyao was right about, it was that having 4 people was the most reassuring. Xianyuan Ling's side didn't make a move, it was unknown what he was planning. On the other side, Xie Tian, who had returned to his residence, also didn't make any movements. After killing Li Xiao, Xie Tian didn't have any intentions of making a move. What a joke! Killing Li Xiao was to create conflict between the Sword Sect and the other large powers. If Xie Tian kept killing him, he would be playing into the Sword Sect's hands. Because of this, SSS heart. This was because if they all died's death, it would be over for the Sword S's problem would be solved. This would save them quite a bit. So, Xie Tian was very smart.